23. The time is 7:36. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by a posting on the bulletin board in Village Hall, by mail to the Ridgewood News, the Record, and by submission to all persons entitled to same as provided by law of a schedule, including the date and time of this meeting. Roll call.
Deputy Mayor Perrin.
Here.
Councilmember Reynolds.
Here.
Councilmember Whites.
Here.
Councilmember Winograd.
Here.
Mayor Vagianos.
Here. Will you all please join us in a salute to our flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll now move to public comments.
Comments are limited to 3 minutes.
Phil, could you make sure that your mic is on? There should be a green light on it, the mic. Here.
Ellie's going to help.
Ellie and Dylan will help you.
There you go.
Oh, thank you. My name is Dr. Philip Dolce. I live at 625 Kingsbridge Lane, and I am a proud Ridgewood resident for over 50 years. We understand that the Historical Preservation Commission and the Shade Tree Commission report directly to the Ridgewood Village Council. They are under your supervision. We ask that the council grant permission to these two commissions to look into the Shedler property and offer the council and the whole Ridgewood community their advice and expertise. These two commissions have the expertise that should be provided directly to the community, especially since they are supported by taxpayer money. In addition, these commissions were established to help Ridgewood with essential information and expertise. The Historic Preservation Commission has an obvious role to play in Shedler, which doesn't have to be discussed. The Shade Tree Commission also has an essential role to play in this issue. The council has enlarged the role of the Shade Tree Commission on several occasions, in the last one by asking them to look at the entire tree canopy in the downtown area. We ask you to do the same thing for the Shedler area. We ask that both commissions listen directly and fully to the ideas and concepts of the community and then use their expertise to come up with recommendations to both the council and the community. We need your help to make this happen. This is a small request, but very important. We hope you will go along with this. Just allow them to look at an issue. That's all we're asking. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Nice to have you here tonight.
Good evening, Ellie Gruber, 229 South Irving, and I'm here to echo Professor Dolce's comments. When you consider someone for the various committees and commissions, you would prefer people with not only interest, but some background in the committee subject. In fact, we have two examples. On the Historic Preservation Commission, the chair is actually the village historian. Several members have backgrounds, either architecture or historic structures. In fact, Mr. Mayor, when the vets presented their preferred rendering of the Gold Star Monument, you insisted that they consider two members of the Historic Preservation Commission to redo their monument because of their expertise. So also was the Shade Tree Commission, where you appointed not only longtime experts, but someone who actually runs a tree service. This is the way it should be. That's why it is overstepping or wrong when you instruct these very commissions to be silent when it came to the Shedler situation. Why did you never consult your own Historic Preservation Commission, but instead go and spend our money to have someone much less qualified to try to undo a state and national certification? If these members can only give advice when asked by you, and only you, you must ask them to do so at this point. I see that the chair of the PRC board had no such constraints when he came here to insist on a large field at Shedler. It appears now that a mouthpiece is preferred over expertise. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. Anyone else tonight? Seeing none, we will move on. I see no one on hybrid access, and so I'm going to close public comment.
I'd like to respond,
By all means.
and maybe Matt as well. I want to be clear, I'm the Shade Tree Liaison. We have several members here. Shedler has been placed on the agenda. We have had some discussions at Shade Tree. Without going back and forth, the general consensus is that the plan's been submitted to SHPO, and once it is approved, because it's sort of, we don't know if the plan is a full go or not, Shade Tree at that point would like to opine on some of the placement and the trees. I know that Keith has met with Carolyn, our chair. I also want to be clear, at no point as the liaison did I ever tell or instruct anybody to be quiet or stay out of it. We had our town attorney visit. That's not how Shade Tree manages. It's not how I work. I've written countless emails to that fact. Shade Tree, I will joke, because even if I tried to tell them to be quiet, they might not listen to me and overwhelm me. They're a very spirited board. And I would say, from my opinion, the group during the discussion, which I am not a voting member, has failed to come to conclusion. I will say that Carolyn and I have had discussions, and once the plan is approved or rejected and then massaged, they will be brought in because they are experts. We have asked them, and Adam, we're very lucky to have him. We rely on him heavily for input. We've asked him many questions. What else did I want to say? So no one, blah, 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 blah. In terms of Parks and Rec had their own independent vote. I do not vote on that, and they came on their own. The idea that I would want any of my committees, or I think any of the five of us, would be so overreaching is not true. It's somewhat offensive, and it's been repeated. Shade Tree is a valuable committee. We have people who work hours and hours for our community for free. And what's gone on in the past couple months over the emails, this idea that we've been telling them to stand down, is just untrue. So it has been discussed, it has been placed on the agenda, in my opinion, and you can ask the chair, you can ask them. They failed to come to conclusion. And when and if the plan is approved by SHPO, that's the time where we need meaningful input. Because at this point, until SHPO approves it, there's really no formal plan. Wait a minute.
Can I just ask a question? So I didn't know, has the plan been sent to SHPO? Because I did not know that.
It hasn't been sent.
Oh, it sounded like it had been sent.
No, hasn't been sent.
It has not.
And it's not the sending that would trigger it, to be clear, before this.
No,
When
I
the
understand
plan-
that. I'm just curious.
No, I just want to reiterate, because there
Status.
ends up being, the plan that is on the website is exactly as is. So for example, there's dogwoods on it. If I took it to Shade Tree and Shade Tree said, we want different trees, we can't change that, because it's got to come back out for a vote. So the time for Shade Tree to be brought in will be after the plan is formalized. And again, at no point did anyone on this council or our lawyer tell Shade Tree to stand down.
Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll move on to the manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. From Parks and Recreation, first I want to report that Maple Field was opened last week after all the mitigation and testing was done, so our children are back out playing on Maple Field. In the next few weeks, we will start the planting of 120 trees to be planted in the right-of-way. That's being conducted by our Parks and Recreation Department with the support of the Shade Tree Commission. This week, on Monday morning at 6 a.m., contractors were in the Commercial Business District planting 32 new trees in that area of the village. I want to thank Jeremy Kleiman from our Office of Emergency Management. Our updated emergency response plan was submitted last week to the County of Bergen for review and approval, and I just want to give a shout out to Jeremy because he was able to submit the new plan 2 months before the deadline, so kudos to Jeremy and his team. This morning, I was advised by engineering that our signal division just finished installing a new pedestrian-activated flashing crosswalk warning light at the intersection of Linwood Avenue and Fairfield Avenue. just a few blocks from here. This is a heavily traveled intersection, especially for children who are walking to school. So I want to thank Chris and Rich and the team at Signal for getting this done to increase pedestrian safety here in the village. I also want to thank Chris and his team for submitting our updated community rating system. We received a congratulations letter this week that our annual construction certificate review has been submitted, and we are in compliance with the community rating system. This is a program that allows our residents who are required to take out flood insurance to reduce their premiums based on efforts that the village takes to reduce flood mitigation. I want to thank Rich Calby at Ridgewood Water and his team. He and I co-signed a letter that went out last week to all non-Ridgewood Water customers in the four-town service area. That letter was to assess whether or not those individuals are on private wells or are the customers of another water service provider. In that letter, we also discussed the possibility of those private homeowners sharing with Ridgewood Water any testing results from private wells so that we can get a baseline data of what the testing results are in areas that are not serviced by Ridgewood Water. So Rich and his team are collecting that data. He reported at our department directors meeting on Monday morning that he's already received responses from residents, and we strongly want to encourage folks, not only in Ridgewood, but throughout the service area, who are on private wells. If you do have private sampling and testing results, please share those with Ridgewood Water so that we can enhance our database. Our new leaf collection flyer went out last week, redesigned. I want to thank Mike Junta and Jean down at Streets. This flyer should have been received by everybody, and effective October 16th, leaf collection season started. Any questions, you can refer to this document for any information about when leaves will be collected in your area. I don't want to steal the deputy mayor's thunder, but I do want to congratulate the village on receiving the Sustainable Jersey Bronze Level recertification. I'll let Pam talk more about that under her report. And I do want to congratulate one of our employees, Johanna Luttrell, who was honored today. And I'm going to turn it over to our village clerk, Heather Maylander, who attended the luncheon to congratulate Johanna.
I attended the annual awards luncheon for the Association of New Jersey Recyclers with Rich Calby. At that awards luncheon, they did hold on one second, I'm just looking for the exact, a Member of the Year award. This was the first year that this association has given this award, and that award went to Johanna Luttrell, who's worked for our recycling division for decades. And she is innovative, she's excellent at what she does, she goes out to the schools, she thinks of new programs, and I was honored and pleased to be there to honor her. And she was very surprised, and you know, as she said, it's all a team effort, but you know, certainly I'm glad that they recognized her, and it's even more special in my mind because it was the very first time that they've awarded this, and it went to our employee in Ridgewood.
Thank you, Heather. Just a few other items. A lot of discussion over the last few council meetings. Councilman Weitz has brought up concerns at the park and ride on Route 17. I received confirmation today that the park and ride on the left side of the facility will be paved next week. They are going to forward us a schedule. They've also advised us that over the next month or so, the structure, the trailer area in the back left-hand corner of the parking lot will be raised and removed from the site, and they are going to forward the village a landscaping plan to increase the buffer zone between the park and ride area and the residents. In addition to that, I was advised today that they're also going to add additional signage around the location to try to keep people from parking up on the curb and on the grassy areas so that they're parked in appropriate parking stalls. Just a few announcements. Ridgewood's annual Health and Wellness Fair for older adults will be held tomorrow in conjunction with the Ridgewood Health Department. It'll take place between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m. in the Youth Center. Pre-registration is required for that event through Community Pass. The Ridgewood Chamber of Commerce will hold their annual Halloween Haunted Harvest event on Saturday, October 28th from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m., weather permitting, at Memorial Park at Van Ness Square. The Ridgewood Chamber of Commerce final farmers market will be held this Sunday, October 29th, at the train station on the west side. The next council chat is to be held on Saturday, November 4th from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. here at Village Hall. We do encourage folks to make an appointment at extension 2206. However, walk-ins are welcome. The Ridgewood Elder Dinner will take place on Sunday, November 12th from 3 to 5 p.m. Doors open at 2:30 at the old Paramus Reformed Church. Again, registration is required for the dinner through Community Pass. The Ridgewood Guild's 14th Annual Winterfest will be held in Memorial Park at Van Ness Square on Saturday, November 25th from 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. Village Hall and all Village of Ridgewood offices will be closed on Friday, November 10th in honor of Veterans Day. And finally, Village Council meetings upcoming. October 25th will be our work session at 7:30. November 1st, work session at 7:30. November 8th, public meeting at 7:30. December 6th, work session at 7:30. And December 13th, work session at 7:30. I just want to remind everyone that we only meet twice in the month of November and in the month of December. Mayor, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Keith. And let's move on to council reports. Siobhan?
Sure, so thank you. So I want to begin with thanking the Shade Tree Commission, and we have several of them in the audience, and Matt Rogers for participating in Adopt a Sapling. So this was a new novel pilot program. We got 31 saplings in the ground on a very rainy, very wet Saturday. We partnered with the high school community, local volunteers, and it went really, really well. Big shout out to Nancy and Adam who spearheaded it, and everybody who was involved. It was great, the kids were great, and we're really grateful. And to everybody who adopted a sapling, please don't forget to fill your water donut, and if you have any questions, please let us know. In addition to that, Shade Tree, we're very proud of this, has launched a trifold, which is information on a limited paper, and we also launched it on social media about what we do, what to do in case there's problems, some of the issues around town, and it's beautiful. I want to thank Tim Graham, who's in charge of our communications, and I want to thank Mr. Hallaby, who donated some of the pictures. So they're very informative. If you don't like electronics and you like paper, here you go, Paul. There are some for you. And if anybody's interested in volunteering in any of the initiatives, it's a great group. I'm really proud to be the liaison, and I think they made a lot of things happen this month. So thank you, Shade Tree. And again, big shout out to Matt Rogers, who's the only one who showed up to dig holes.
His wife was there too.
Oh,
right?
two, double effort. I also want to let everybody know from Access that we're launching sensory-free dinners. We've partnered with the new LSHSA, which is called CPAG, and a woman named Jamie Davis is launching this, and I think it's very important to understand that within the HSA communities, sometimes kids who have sensory issues opt out because it becomes overwhelming, the stimulation. An example would be a carnival. And some of our elementary schools have started to offer programs where there's an early hour, so they're still included in the event, but it's less stimulation. Steel Wheel and CPAC are offering sensory-free dinner where kids can go. The lights are dim, there's no music, it's for a family with a kid participating in the program they can enjoy, and something that we take for granted, a normal meal out. I'm hoping this whole council is there, ready to waiter and waitress, and that is posted on social media as well. It's on Wednesday, November 8th, and we're hoping it's the first of many. Last night, I attended the Parks meeting, and we had a wonderful meeting that we covered a lot of issues. We're in the process of creating a detailed navigation of all our parks. Ellie, because you're here, we've been drawing heavily on the Wildscape information, including recreational parks as well. And we sent that to the village manager, and we're going to continue to work on that and develop details about our parks so we have more detail so we can draw on it for funding. We also had a discussion of when the fields are closed, whether the lights should be on or off, and that discussion will be ongoing. And we had the rollout of, everyone knows we had the master plan and there were steps to take. Several months ago, Pam and I held a joint meeting between open space and parks, which makes a lot of sense because acquisitions of open space ultimately turn into parks. And we are working our program to take the steps defined in the master plan to roll them out. So I want to thank Jim Bossler for attending PRC. I want to thank Pam for working so nicely with open space and PRC. Have a lot of synergies going. And that is my last update.
Thanks, Siobhan. Evan?
Great, thanks so much. So first, I want to thank Keith for helping out my fellow commuters. For those of you who may recall some of my previous comments, Siobhan and I met with a resident over the summer. I went out and visited her and saw the lack of trees and the fact that we didn't have enough foliage and space between the park and ride and some of the residents whose backyard backs up into it. We reached out. We didn't really get much notice. We didn't really get much from the Department of Transportation that controls that property. Then right after Labor Day, the Department of Transportation closed half of the park and ride because they were going to repave it, but hadn't set a date for it. This was the worst timing imaginable, given that that's when everybody goes back to work right after Labor Day. And I know I was getting calls and pictures of people who were double parked, parking on the side streets. It created just an untenable position for those folks who rely on the park and ride to commute into their jobs in New York City every day. Really through, I think, a lot of diligence by Keith, it sounds like we now have some real progress. Sounds like we're going to have some paving done, so they'll be able to reopen the other half of the park and ride, so we can actually have parking for those residents that use that facility. Sounds like we're going to get some more trees for those residents who back up whose backyards back up onto the park and ride. But really, just an example of really good government. And I know, as a resident, Keith, thank you for your advocacy here. As I know everyone else who uses that park and ride and lives in the adjoining area, thanks you as well. Really thrilled that we're able to get some progress on that from DOT, so thank you for that. Other than that, just two other quick topics. Met with the Ridgewood Arts Council. We are going to be working on the window decorating contest this year. I think this is, I lost track, but we've done this several years in the past. We're going to go meet on Saturday, get the word out to all the businesses downtown about the competition. Ridgewood Guild has donated has donated some prizes as well. We're going to go ahead and do the judging at the end of November, and then we'll announce the winners of all the local businesses in December. I'm really excited about that. At the end, it really doesn't matter who wins, because we all win, because it just makes downtown Ridgewood look that much prettier. Finally, want to thank Matt Rogers as well as the mayor for joining me at the Upper Ridgewood Community Church. Unfortunately, as I know, word has started to get out, the church is closing. The church was kind enough to host a forum for some of the surrounding neighbors about possible uses for the property going forward. It sits right in the middle of a fairly dense residential area, so what happens there is really meaningful for the people that live around there. Matt was able to give all of us a primer on zoning law, talk about what some potential outcomes could be, and just give an overview to the process, how people could be heard as they start the process of figuring out what is going to happen with that property over the next several years. Paul attended as well. I know that was meaningful, and really just wanted to thank Matt for giving his time, as well as Paul for coming and being able to speak to all the residents in that community.
Thanks, Evan. Lorraine?
Thank you. The Citizen Safety Advisory Committee met last Thursday night. It was a robust meeting, to say the least. We started with a follow-up to a resident who had previously brought up concerns with the intersection of Hamilton and Morningside Road. She said that there was speeding, people were going through stop signs, there was a sight triangle obstruction. So the police department from the previous month said they would send people out and take a look, and they did note that people were speeding, going through stop signs. Road painting as a traffic calming solution was discussed. That's been forwarded to the engineering department for their review, and we hope to hear something by the next meeting. I know that Keith has been working with the engineering department to try and get a solution. Another resident expressed the need for a pedestrian crosswalk signal at the intersection of North Maple and Linwood Avenue. and has expressed the need also for a comprehensive, proactive plan by the village to ensure pedestrian safety. I think that's a great idea, and we will continue to be discussing this at our next meeting. Another resident who had previously submitted over 100 site triangle obstructions expressed concern over the process of how we are addressing these obstructions. Officer Ward was fabulous, and he volunteered to go to all of the obstructions, site triangle obstructions on the list, and kind of make a chart of the 15 most concerning intersections. To qualify in these top 15, the intersection had to have at least one property in violation, so one property on the four corners. It had to be within a half a mile of at least one school, and it had to have at least 6 motor vehicle accidents in the past 5 years. So there are 21 properties at these 15 intersections that are alleged to be in violation of the site triangle obstruction. Most of these 21 properties have already been sent letters by the engineering department to correct the violations. The ones that haven't, hopefully letters will be going out shortly. And we'll continue to follow up and, you know, be on the lookout. We really need the residents to comply when they get these letters. If you have shrubs that are too tall, that are a site obstruction, please trim them. They can't be more than 30 inches high. There's many regulations, but when you get the letter, actually, we got a copy. I had asked Keith to send me a copy of the letter because I thought it was strictly like a form letter from engineering, but it's really very comprehensive. It explains what the person is in violation of. It has pictures. It's really, really good. And if you get one of these letters, I ask you, please comply. It's the best thing for the community. It's for the safety of our community. Many of these areas, our kids walk into school. It really is very important to comply with the rules. So thank you in advance for taking care of that if you get a letter. The need for a stop sign at the intersection of the Franklin Avenue extension and North Irving was discussed. Some neighbors felt that there used to be a stop sign years ago. It seems to have disappeared. I don't know if there ever was or wasn't. There's no record of it, but they've seen landscaping trucks come out of that Franklin Avenue extension and not stop because there is no stop sign, and there was almost an accident a few weeks ago. A follow-up to concerns at the lighting in the area of Franklin Avenue and Broad Street were discussed. The Ridgewood Police Department reported that a list of light locations in need of repair was sent to PSE&G and the village manager, so hopefully they will all be fixed promptly. A discussion regarding Clinton Road near Ridge School continued from last month. The Ridgewood Police Department had been observing the area and has taken up a campaign to educate drivers and also the children walking on Clinton Avenue. New signage has been installed, and this seems to be really helping. I want to thank the Ridgewood Police Department for going out there and talking to drivers, talking to the kids, and having everybody aware how to help with safety issues. The results of a speed study on Bel Air Road were reported. It was recommended that enforcement be carried out and possibly a double yellow line along with a possible white lines on the edge to be considered. These are considered called fog lines sometimes. This is up for further discussion. A new electric speed sign was installed on East Glen near Bogart Avenue. The Ridgewood Police Department will follow up on the progress of an in-street crosswalk sign at Bogart. These are the signs that if you're driving, you know, the speed limit is 25. If you're going over 25, it gives the speed limit you're going, and it says, please slow down. If you're going 25 or less, it has the number, and it also says thank you. which I think is very nice to see. Our next meeting, we typically meet the third Thursday of every month, but next month we have an issue with many of our committee members not able to make it. So I believe we are switching it to the day before, Wednesday, November 15th, the third Wednesday of the month. I just need to confirm with police and engineer to make sure that somebody can be there. But I wanted to get it out there that that's a possibility. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Lorraine.
Through you, Mayor, just to Councilwoman Reynolds, I have 2 calls scheduled with 2 of those concerned residents from the CSAC meeting, one for Monday and one for Friday. So I will get back to you and let you know what the results of those conversations are.
Thank you.
Pam?
As the village manager stated, the Sustainable Green Team, which handles our accreditation with Sustainable Jersey, got bronze certification, and I have to tell you, this takes a lot of work because certain of the things you got credit for, they take away those. So even though we've done a lot of good work in the past, you have to keep doing further work to keep up your certification. And this group really, I have to applaud their efforts. They were very creative, and Ridgewood will be recognized as one of the leading communities in the state with regard to green practices at the New Jersey League of Municipalities luncheon during the conference on November 14th, and I plan to be there. And also, the Green Team will be having some openings, so if you're interested in this work, it really is kind of eye-opening to see what you can do to increase your sustainable practices for the village. The Green Ridgewood, which is the overarching committee, is working on a recommendation to the village for a carbon reduction target and a climate resiliency statement to set out goals for the village. Open Space welcomed a new member, Oleg Rifkin, and we are going to investigate insurance practices with regard to flood claims submitted. It may be that insurance is going to be harder and harder to find for flooding events for homeowners. That could change how we look at our flood acquisition plan. We are also going to reinstitute the park walks that we did during COVID. Each of our parks will have a conducted tour, and so those were really fun, and we learned a lot, and so do the residents. Let's see, the planning board met, and we heard Ridgewood Water's application to build another PFAS treatment facility at 1156 East Ridgewood Avenue. You probably haven't noticed their building because it's on a flag lot behind another building. It's on the south side of East Ridgewood Avenue, opposite the duck pond. And after the presentation, Planning Board voted unanimously to approve that building. Let's see, we also talked about amending Chapter 190 of the Village Code having to do with zoning in the B1 and B2 districts, both as to microbreweries and exclusionary zoning, which is a type of zoning that some towns have instituted, and we asked the planner, John Barry, to go ahead and do research for us on both those items. Let's see. The Central Business District Advisory Committee welcomed a new member, Andy McGonigal. Yes, that's McGonnell, that's right. I read too many Harry Potter books. And also Stuart Copperweiss of Economic Development Strategies gave the same presentation that we had here a few weeks ago. He gave to the CBDAC, and people had a lot of questions. So it was a very good meeting on that score. Also very good because Keith Kasmark came and introduced himself and told us all what his impressions are as an objective viewer of Ridgewood, and that was really interesting too. Let's see. I was telling the CBDAC members about Councilwoman Winograd's suggestion on, her initiative to refurbish the decorative holiday balls that used to hang in the village, and they suggested that the best location for the decorations would be if the snowflakes were on East Ridgewood Avenue and the balls, the refurbished balls, were on the side streets, because the snowflakes are brighter than the balls. So you get more bang for your buck, more oomph in the decorations. And that was just their input. We also voted to meet via Zoom going forward, although once a quarter we will meet in person. It's going to be a little hard to follow, but our next meeting is going to be November 9th via Zoom, and we're going to have the same presentation that we had here at the council from Hub Quarter. We're going to see that there. We're also going to be discussing amendment of our bylaws. Let's see. I do want to thank the Conservancy for Ridgewood Public Lands for installing new plantings on North Broad Street. It really is a lovely design, and I look forward to seeing it flower in the spring. Let's see. I did want to mention what an asset Johanna Luttrell is to the recycling department and to sanitation, because you can contact her by phone or by email anytime and say, I have a kiln, how do I get rid of this kiln? Or I have an electric typewriter, how do I recycle it? Her email address is jluttrell, 2 T's, 2 L's, at ridgewoodnj.net, and she's just a great resource. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Pam. And I just have one question. After 115 days, is Keith still objective? I think he's subjective at this point. I think he's partial to us. Excellent, excellent, good. He's already pleading the fifth. We're off to a great start. And let's move on with our agenda. Keith? Or Heather? I lose track.
Wait, isn't it your turn?
It is mine. None of my committees have met, or I was unable to attend the meetings, so.
Okay, Mayor, tonight we have 2 presentations. The first, I would invite Lieutenant Chuck and our village engineer, Chris Rudishauser, forward. There is a memo in the packet that was prepared by Lieutenant Chuck with regard to a potential cell site project here at Village Hall. This is been deemed necessary to enhance public safety communications here in the village. However, it will have a residual effect on individual cell carrier service for members of the public as well. So with that, I will turn it over to the lieutenant and the village engineer.
So we all know that cell coverage in this building is almost non-existent.
I need you to speak into the microphone, please.
Is that better?
Is
Even
it-
with my big voice?
Is it on?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Now I can hear you.
So we all know that cell coverage in the building is non-existent, and even on the grounds, almost non-existent. Graydon Pool, not very good. Linwood Avenue, not very good. So this year, as Lieutenant James left the police department, I got the luxury of taking over the 4th of July for the police department, and with that, working with Verizon. And I'm sure you guys have seen in the past, during this special event of 4th of July, there actually is no coverage. Like, forget, like, I may be able to get a phone call out, it's not happening. No cell phone coverage, your phone goes into SOS, there's 15,000 people here, and there's nothing. And over the last couple of years, we've been working with the Verizon emergency team to try to create some sort of network for public safety to use, and that has failed every year. And this year, we met with a nice group, and they basically said, what are we doing here? We can just build infrastructure here and have regular cell coverage, and it would be a dynamic change for this area. So with that, we've been researching it, and we've been able to determine that Village Hall is actually a great location to add some cell towers to. Dylan has a screenshot above us. They are looking to put 3 antenna sets on top of the building, which would basically give 360-degree coverage from about the area of Valley Hospital through the CBD. So that would be the coverage increase. As far as our special events where there's no cell phone available at all, they said we would be able to handle any amount of usage during that special event from the cell towers that they're going to supply with us. With that comes the devices itself. So I'm sure let's talk about that right away. What do they look like? We'll go to the next one. That's what they look like.
Sorry, just on the first, there was some other stuff that was circled. What was that? I mean, is it just 3 antennas on the roof of this building, or is it something else?
So it's 3 antennas and I'll call it a platform. It's smaller than this table of where all the antennas go.
But it's on the ceiling, on the roof.
Everything's on the roof.
Okay, so what is the, oh, I see, okay, these are like pointing, all right,
They're
never mind.
they're just pointing, those circles are pointing at where the antennas would be located.
Gotcha, but either way, everything goes on the roof of this building, nobody sees anything from the ground unless you look up.
Yep.
Gotcha.
So we just looked at the picture of what the antennas actually look like. And we're going to scroll up a little bit, Dylan, to the picture before this. And this is the image of you looking up and seeing the antennas.
You can't see them.
Can't see them, can you?
Okay.
That's the point. So we've worked with them to create an exact facade that would match the building and hide the antennas.
So our committee that's been working on this, very sensitive to the aesthetic aspects of adding these to Village Hall. Obviously, we don't want to be able to see them from the street. We don't want to be able to see them from Vets Field. We wanted to make sure that they were masked and that it did not affect the impressive visual nature of Village Hall.
Right. So if that wasn't good enough, we had some other positives from meeting with Verizon. One, because of the infrastructure that they're putting up, they were more comfortable with putting a backup generator to make sure that their antennas always had power during power failures. We currently have a power generator for Village Hall, which is inadequate for the needs of Village Hall. Through some discussion, they've agreed to subsidize us purchasing a new generator for the entire building. If
How
that
much-
wasn't good enough,
When you say subsidize, pay for it completely, or?
no.
Okay, so can you
No.
expand on that a little bit, please?
We would have to buy a pretty large generator, and we've been able to agree that the cost of their generator and their installation and all that stuff would go towards ours. So I can't give you exact numbers, but it would be a strong contribution to the new generator for next year.
So do we, I don't know, I know Bob's not here, but have we budgeted for a new generator? Because my concern is even if they
Yes.
cover, all right, so that's already built in for next year?
It is for next year. It's in the police budget,
Oh, it's in the police budget?
yes,
For next year?
for capital.
It's in the budget request for next year.
Yes, it's in the budget request for next year.
Ah, okay, so that's another key topic, or key point. So I'm just trying to figure out how much this is actually going to cost us. Like, it's great that we'll get a subsidy, but, you know, at the end of the day, how much, you know, what's it going to cost?
So,
So let's backtrack here. One of the reasons that Chris is here is because he's going to explain the bid process. We don't have the ability, while we did speak to Verizon about this conceptually, and actually I think they may have approached us, right?
Yes.
Right, Jay? So we can't just go out and contract with Verizon. There's a bid process. Chris has been through this before, and that's why I've asked him to come to explain that to you. But I think the councilwoman has a question.
Yeah, so first of all, I love it. I think it's great. I think it's a total responsibility when assembling a crowd to have this. My question is random. I've been told that the generator that we purchased at Ridgewood Water exceeds what Ridgewood Water needs. Is there any way we could tap into that as the backup generator, and get Verizon to pay for the channeling over there? I mean, I know that the library was looking to sort of splice.
They still are.
Okay, and is there enough generator over there to cover it? No? Okay.
I don't believe there's sufficient generator capacity. I would look at that only after the library is connected and see what their load demands is. The other issue is the length of any kind of wiring conduit that would be needed. The Village Hall currently has a 100 kW natural gas-fired generator. We would probably be looking at something in the order of 200 kW, 250 kW to cover both the needs of Village Hall, the ones that are unmet with the 100 kW, and the needs for whoever is a successful carrier that needs emergency generating capacity. And we also would be switching the current generator, which is natural gas fired, out, and we would be going to a diesel unit.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we have any idea of the range of what such a generator might cost? Because we don't know if we're talking $5,000 or $500,000.
You're closer to 500. I would say in the 200,000 to 300,000 off the top of my head.
Got it.
Again, as Lieutenant Chuck said, there is going to be a partnership between whoever is the successful vendor. And let me touch on what Keith had mentioned. We're going to go out for proposal on this. We cannot overtly say, we want this carrier. We will put a proposal out, we will solicit proposals, and then the council will select the best option for the village. And in that proposal, we'll look for what kind of partnership a prospective carrier would have with the village for an emergency generator upgrade, how much a carrier would pay the village for the privilege of doing what we're talking about, because while we're looking for the benefit from public safety communication, this project also enhances the broadband width in this area tremendously. That is a significant benefit to the selected carrier, and they will compensate the village thereof for that.
Yeah,
So, I mean, this is all great. I mean, I have no problem with, it looks great, and we absolutely need it. I think my concern, and I think Paul's hitting upon this, is that, and by the way, I have no problem going out either, so I'm gonna, I'm a good vote to go out on this. My concern, though, is before you come back to us, is I want to know how much we're obligated to now spend on the delta between the subsidy and what this generator is going to cost us.
So,
Because if we sign this contract with whomever, and it sounds like Verizon's the leader, we're obligated to put the generator in next year, and we're obligated to pay the difference between the subsidy and whatever the thing costs. And don't get me wrong, we need a generator, I'm down with that, but I don't want to be obligated, even before we get to the budget process, have a certain chunk of money obligated because we signed our line on this. I know we've already said we're going to do the bridge at Kings Lane. We've already said we're going to do the sidewalks at Glen. We're going to have a bunch of other stuff to do. And I don't want our hands tied because we signed the contract saying that we're going to do this. We need to know what that delta is. We need to get Bob to tell us if there's going to be enough money for this generator next year before I personally would entertain signing this. But with that, I know I'm getting ahead of myself. No problem going out. Sounds like a great idea, but that's going to be my questions when you come back to us.
So through you, Mayor, I think our ask tonight is permission to move forward with soliciting proposals. The contents of those proposals will drive the answers to the questions that the council's asking, and we'll be able to put what our responsibility would be out there for your consideration, in addition to projecting what the revenue would be over the life of the contract. So I think we need to have all of those factors to make a sufficient decision. We're looking for authorization tonight for Chris to formalize the bid package, which he's already started to draft, and get that out on the street as soon as possible so we know exactly what the factors are in considering this proposal.
Yeah, and it sounds like we'll know what that delta is when we go out for proposals. We won't know, I mean, we'll have to independently go out for, I guess, a separate proposal for the generator.
I was anticipating putting that into the RFP package.
Right.
That whatever respondent wanted to present the proposal to the village, what their percentage is of the upgrade of the emergency power
Right,
generator.
they're gonna tell us what they'll kick in, but.
Yes, I would
but
like
we're
them
not
to.
looking for them to put in the big generator.
No.
We'll be putting out a separate proposal from that, and then we'll put the two proposals together, and we'll find out what the delta is.
So also remember, there's some other income potential here. One is for the lease of the space on the roof. And we have also identified at least 2 other areas in the village where cell service is low, and we could add additional cell sites. Each one of those sites comes with lease agreements. So this is a multi-year income with an added bonus of some sort of subsidized to the generator program.
And the potential of additional locations,
And it-
assuming we deem them aesthetically acceptable.
Yep.
Correct?
So again,
Locations in the
I think
town.
it's a no-brainer to go out. I'm just trying to give you an idea in terms of the questions I'm gonna have when you come back. I wanna know what the bottom line is, but it sounds like we'll know that when we get the.
Yeah, no,
the
total,
roads in.
all totally reasonable, and it does plug into the capital budget at some level. And again, we'd also have to assess what our revenue intake would be on a potential contract here, and whether or not it would over time cover costs. So I think all of those factors need to be considered, but we're looking for the authorization to go out for proposal.
I assume that you would be looking at the weight of this equipment and whether the roof can sustain it, can carry it?
Matter of fact, this company, Verizon, let's name names, has already asked for that information. I'm not releasing it until it's awarded to someone, because I feel that would be premature, shall we say. Because the whole process with the proposal is, we don't know who's out there, we don't know who's going to offer what to us. I don't want to bias towards any particular carrier. There's not that many left anymore, but I don't want to show bias to either one.
Yeah, and it has to be a fair and open process, so.
Okay. And you also mentioned that it would cover the whole central business district?
So-
Would that include Van Ness Square? Because I find coverage there to be terrible.
So again, there's a limitation during our conversations with the actual heat maps that they'll show us, but they are saying that we will have significant increase in 5G technology and LTE technology from East Ridgewood Ave to Valley Hospital.
Well, okay. That doesn't necessarily cover Van Ness Square.
And if I may, Pam, and I think one of the drawbacks to this is because we do have to go out for a proposal, we do have to get bid submissions back. You know, Verizon's not going to share all of their information with us, and I think that's the experience that Jay had.
Yeah.
You know, they were approached us, they said, would this be something you'd be interested in? You'd have to go through this process, but they're not going to show us how far-reaching it is because they could potentially have competition in submitting a bid proposal here.
I seem to recall that we engaged an expert with regard to 5G. Heather, do you recall that, right? And I think we don't even pay for him.
It's Hoplite.
Yeah. Maybe we should run this by him also.
That would require funding from you folks to do. They're not going to do it for free.
I think you're just looking for the green light with the idea,
Yep.
which you
Correct.
guys, I think the idea and getting more information seems good.
Yeah, the next step is really putting this out, see what responses we get, and if it's a viable
Yeah.
package to move forward with.
Yeah.
We'll
I
come
just,
back-
I
we'll come
just
back
wanted
with
to
a
bring up that we have engaged this fellow, and whenever it's appropriate to bring him in, we should take advantage of his advice.
Perhaps the time to bring him in would be to help review the proposals. I think from here, it seems pretty straightforward that we should go out. You know, I mean, putting aside the services, I know that these cell tower antenna agreements can be relatively lucrative. I'm not sure what lucrative means, but I know that, you know, they are sought after. And so if we can get them here, if we can get better coverage, and really the cost of this is how much we want to upgrade a separate system, our generator system. And that's really our call. But I don't see any downside to this. So if there are other questions, let's get through with them. But if not, let's give these guys, their marching orders so they can get going on this.
I'm in favor of it. I just have one last dumb question.
No dumb
What's the
questions.
difference between a cell tower and an antenna?
An antenna is that thing?
A node.
Here, wait, I can answer your question. A cell tower is a tower that has antenna on it.
Yeah.
Oh, so the tower holds the antenna?
Yes.
So think of the
Exactly right.
tower
Okay.
as the tree that you see on the parkway that has all the fake antennas on it that look like trees. That is the.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just-
Gotcha.
they have these antenna on them. This is, like, we have several buildings in town, like the Lincoln Building, for example, that is a high point, literally a high elevation, and it has a lot of antenna on it. And the advantage to the carrier is they don't have to build a tower, which is expensive, very time-consuming, because they're very difficult to find good placement for. So this can be a win-win. We'll have to see when you guys bring your stuff back. So does anybody have any objection to them going out to bid on this?
Nope. No.
Good.
Good luck.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Our next presentation is from the Shade Tree Commission. I'm going to turn it over to Councilwoman Winograd to make the introduction.
You can come up.
While she's making the introduction, we'll ask George Wolfson and Tim Graham to come forward.
Okay, well, while they're sitting, I'm going to channel my inner Carolyn, because she wrote a statement. She couldn't be here. She's learning how to be an even better and stronger Shade Tree Chair, and we're very grateful for her. So she wrote this up. So I am no longer me. I am her, and I am reading this for her committee. Since the reestablishment of the Ridgewood Shade Tree Commission in 2014 as an advisory group to the Village Council, a major focus of STC has been to provide current best practices to the Council for the protection, conservation, and expansion of our tree canopy. With our purview mainly focused on municipal shade trees, it became evident that without a protective tree ordinance stipulating allowable actions by homeowners and developers regarding tree removals, that our overall village canopy was being adversely impacted. In 2021, Pam Perrin and Carolyn Jacoby worked to revise an existing tree ordinance that proved, I'm getting to that. I'm still Carolyn. Sorry. That had proved somewhat ineffective. The current updated ordinance became effective in May 2022. Though it provided much-needed improvements to the previous iteration, during the past almost 18 months, the current ordinance is now recognized as having limits in effectiveness by lack of consistent means of enforcement of regulations. Tonight, George Wolfson, a longstanding member of Shade Tree, along with Tim Graham, will present recommendations for the council to consider. Areas in this ordinance needing revision will be proposed in order to ensure that our overall village canopy is adequately maintained and continues to grow, providing great environmental health benefits for the well-being of all our residents and adding greatly to the beauty of our village.
Well, thank you very much for...
George, if you could speak into the microphone so that the people listening.
It's on.
Okay.
Is that any better?
Much better.
Here we go.
Yeah, you have to get close to it.
Okay. Again, thank you for inviting us to participate in this presentation. This represents a continuation of an effort that started 5 years ago. It was continued, a couple of wins, a couple of losses along the way, and eventually Deputy Mayor Perron and Perrin, rather, and Carolyn were able to negotiate a starting point for the tree, a protective tree ordinance. The, one second. Everybody knew at the time that the ordinance would need further improvement, but we needed to get some experience under our belt, and we felt putting up, getting it on the books and starting to run it would be very useful. And that's proven the case. The other point is that being involved in this type of an exercise actually checks a couple of boxes for us on the Tree City checklist. We, one, the ordinance is a requirement of the Tree City designation, and so we want to make sure we have a good one that works. And the fact that it's being done by a group, a commission, a department of the town is another one of the checklist items of the 4 that they require. So it's all good for the Shade Tree Commission, which, as you all know, is an advisory group, not a true commission in a true governmental sense. So if we go to the next slide. So the process that we used in putting this together is we started with a meeting at the engineering department. It's too bad I don't have a collar I could wear this with.
Do you want a handheld mic? Would that
Yeah,
be?
that might be better. Yeah, I'll make it work. Don't worry about it. Yeah, I'll make it work. See, you have to speak and read at the same time. It's getting a little tricky here. So we started with meetings at the engineering group. We had Yendi, Chris, and Peter involved, which is important. They gave us their ideas on what's working and what's not working. They gave us, thank you. And they gave us some ideas as to what we needed. I'm okay. They gave us ideas on what we needed to do to try to make it a better product, something that would be useful. We listened to the various voices in the community on web pages, village council meetings, to hear what people liked or what they didn't like or where the complaints were. We went and created, if you look at that document on the right, I'm sure you can't read it, but it's to show you that what we did was take 10 municipalities in New Jersey that exhibit best practices within their protective shade tree ordinance, put that on a sheet, which is really just a working document, not a presentation document, but to be able to see how things lined up, what was comparable, what looked good, and also to make suggestions when we get into making changes. We then, within the council, within the commission, had discussions about what people really felt were important points, and where we felt we could get some of the rules changed. We then went back just recently, sat with the village manager, Keith, and discussed the perspective of making changes within, which most of all of this is within his purview. So we want to make sure that we're getting direction, and making comments towards the village manager's department. And lastly, what will be, hopefully we'll be able to move on from here for constructing a real ordinance that will involve both best practices and for tonight to move on to next steps, where we're going from here. So, next slide, please. In reviewing the ordinances, we found that there really are 3 key components. The first one is what I would call land development, which is basically falls under the jurisdiction of the planning board. The next one is has been called by many home improvement, which are really the actions of the Board of Adjustment. And the third is the canopy preservation aspect of the ordinances. excuse me. The canopy preservation part takes into consideration the canopy's benefits. One second. Takes into consideration the canopy's benefits to the town as a whole. These, we'll be getting into some of the topics in that, but those are the three basic areas. The first item we thought needed to be looked at.
George, forgive me, if you could keep the microphone close to your mouth, because as you turn away,
And it doesn't go with me.
we don't hear you as well. And
All right.
and the people watching on television can't
Are
hear
we
you.
sure it's on?
It's on,
Because-
it's on, it's on.
Okay, because the people in the audience, I don't know if they can hear.
Yeah,
Okay,
much better.
Oh, that is.
there we go.
Excellent.
I'll eat it. The most important, or one of the more important pieces of this effort centers around the land use portion. The land use portion basically requires that there be a site plan for pending activity. It's important that we bring the language of Chapter 220, which is the shade tree provisions, into the Chapter 190, which is the land use portion,
Did you mean
so that
260?
all those components get transferred into the requirement when you make the site plan. Site plan has to be drawn up, and it should be evaluated based on the protective tree ordinance provisions. So that needs to be the first kind of step to really make this a useful document. As you see as we go through this, there are many places where enforcement and inspection becomes the key to making the project work. Without that, we can write all the rules, but it's not going to have any impact. So keep that in mind as we go through that, because I'll be saying that a couple of times as we go through.
And George, Pam had a question while you were speaking.
Yeah, I think you said 220 in the code. I think you meant 260.
Yeah, 260. Yeah. So that then means really that the planning board, and I'm going to also throw in the Board of Adjustment at this point, because the two kind of have that same responsibility, have to make sure that that the site plan is complete, that the site plan the site is actually inspected according to the design of the plan, and we would request that in some way that a CO not be issued until that plan and that site line up. This is really one of the major things that we can accomplish in terms of making a ordinance better. Again, it will cover the new developments from the planning board. Within this area, within these two areas, or just the land use in general, we really address the clear cutting question, which everybody seems to pick on today. We basically gives us the ability to adjust the plan for special occasion, for special instances, like if there's development to be done in a floodplain, we can adjust that particular part of the ordinance to represent a higher standard for change. Some towns have done this, whereas if you want to build in a floodplain, you need to do a better job of replacing trees. So there's a lot of benefit to being able to extend it and the strength of the land use chapters. And it's something that we need to, you guys really need to do that. I call this a, it's not a rule change, really. Go to- flip to 10. If we look at this, this is really a systemic change to the way in which the village operates. Because it involves changing roles, changing management, bringing in different departments. Yes. and therefore, it's going to take a lot of thought and process on how to move it into that department. It's not just a matter of changing language. There's a lot there.
So, George, just one question. I think Pam, I want to say in fairness to Pam, she's been partially in this, but Lorraine ran through the dry run, but Pam was very much, because we can't all three meet, so she's going to have more questions, and Lorraine and I had the luxury of a preview, so I'm going to, Pam has a couple, go ahead.
Expected.
Will you be presenting to the planning board? That should happen at some point, right, Matt?
Well, what happened is that once we put together the form of the ordinance, then either you can take it right to the planning board, or the council can review it, make some changes, but take the ask then for the planning board's recommendation.
Gotcha.
So,
Okay.
but you need to have that ordinance developed first and written.
Right. So, and just because everyone's, so one of the next steps that we're going to ask for is some of your time, Matt, to actually
Sure.
take some of the presentation and create the legal language into that. And then I would think, since this is a workshop, so we can be more iterative and everybody can I think they should come back here first and then go to the planning board. What do you guys think? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because there's a lot, the interplay between the council and Shade Tree Commission and any of the commissions is more important, or significantly important, as is the review by the planning board. I shouldn't say more. It's just, it's significantly important.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
sure.
Well, but when they come back, we'll have a draft ordinance to be looking at.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
Got
That's the idea.
So that's the first really big ask, is to get that process started. We can get into who does what to whom, but I think that's for a later date when we really can put together a process of kicking the tires and seeing that works. There's a lot of components to that question that need to be answered first before we can move on.
And to make everybody feel, I mean, we're all in agreement with that Matt could work on it, create a draft version, and we could move forward to making, as-built and effectively implementing that.
I think that's clearly the next step is to have Siobhan and Lorraine, or Siobhan and Pam, working with Matt and with the commission to come up with a draft ordinance so that we can have something to evaluate and, as you said, kick the tires.
So the next item that I brought into focus here is one of the items that I consider, my joke is that these are down the rabbit hole items. They're really rule changes mostly, which really is, I believe, next steps for this should be a meeting with the village manager, because this is really his purview, where we can at least participate in the process of making the changes that he believes would be useful and actionable. As I say, we're an advisory committee, but we would certainly like to be involved in the process.
And my recommendation there would be, as we start to draft the ordinance, that we have a sort of subcommittee that includes some department directors and some supervisors who are intimately involved in this, both on the public works side and on the park side, so that we can work through staff recommendations for the ordinance as well as the commissions.
So one of the things is, if we make some changes, I think Lorraine and I in the meeting, is who's going to do it, because the existing setup may need some changes because there's additional support, because we're becoming stricter in the ordinance, and that was something else we wanted to make people aware of. And that's, by the way, I do want to give, because Chris is here, Chris's department has done a wonderful job. It's nothing, like, it's great, and everything has worked very well under the existing ordinance, but with the improvements, we may need to move that around a bit.
And it's an important piece. One of the first questions on my third visit to the engineering department was, how did we get awarded this wonderful task? So,
What are we doing?
you know, we can now figure that out. So we can go to the next one.
Before we go on, I just had a question, George. So this says a permit would be required for removal of any tree in the village over the 8 inches DBH or for 10 feet height for conifers.
Mhm.
So that's new, right? I've never
That
seen it.
That would be one of the rule changes. We realized that in the first go-round, trying to just get something on the books, we went out with a one-to-one adjustment. You take one out, you put one back. We did not put a lot of requirements on that one that you're putting back. We find that that's not right, that we need to put changes in terms of the size, and particularly for the conifers. We can get away with the DBH rule with the deciduous trees, but with the conifers, what we found was that folks were trying to get around the ordinance by just going with a very cheap conifer, sticking it in the ground, which doesn't give us the same benefit. But what a number of the municipalities have done is to make a height requirement so that it no longer becomes just a cheap solution. It becomes a real remedy to the problem. So if you go to the nursery and price out a 10-foot conifer, you're talking, you know, not overly expensive, but a reasonably priced tree as opposed to the cheapest tree in the nursery.
So I'm confused. Are you considering a deciduous tree or a 10-foot conifer could be the same? They're interchangeable?
No.
The rule, there are a lot of studies as to what benefits of just a conifer versus a deciduous tree are. The end of the day, all the studies come back with saying, as far as we can tell, you know, it may change during various growth periods of the tree, but basically it's the same. Now, you can go and research it and find just the exact opposite answer. So the answer is there's really no clear answer. Some of the municipalities have done, taken the approach where they say if you take out a deciduous tree, you put back a deciduous tree. If you take out a conifer, you put back a conifer. Those are the rules that we have to develop
Okay.
as we go,
I mean,
as we
to
go
me,
forward.
I think
Yeah.
that's the better, I like that. You know, I just don't consider a conifer the same as a deciduous tree.
We are looking for more of an equality. Like, you know, currently under the existing ordinance, I'm saying this more for Paul and for Evan, because we've been, I hope the rabbit hole slide comes up here. If you take out a large oak right now under the existing ordinance, you can pop in a dogwood, and that's the ordinance is met and it's achieved, but they're not equivalent. So we were looking to get stricter in the execution of apples to apples, dogwoods to
Okay.
dogwoods.
Or people are throwing in arborvitae, and, you know,
Arborvitae,
yeah, that's not real, that's more like a shrub.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's part of the rule development as we go forward with rules. Those are the types of things under the permit requirements that we would look to adjust. The next slide comes out of the engineering department. The only number that I would give you that I would believe in at this point is the permits issued. The rest of it is open for interpretation, primarily because, as we will see later on, the verification process is not what I would call solid, and that's an area that we have to get into again with our rules. As we develop the rules, we have to get into the verification process and who does it and how it happens. So what we can do, what we can't do, in order to make these numbers correct.
Right. No, this slide blew my mind. I mean, in 2023, there were 606 trees removed and 591 were exempt. That means 97% of the trees are exempt.
And that's another
That's
reason we need to
crazy.
change the ordinance, because let's just assume that maybe that's right. So. So we go to the next one.
So just because we've got like ash trees, Evan, because I feel like I've never tree talked with Evan or Paul, ash trees, dead trees, there are exemptions. And then what the concern is from the staffing perspective is that if I wanted to say this tree is dead or diseased, you could work on that. But with enforcement, they might come out and find it's actually not. So there are valid exemptions, like we want to discourage anybody from removing a dead, diseased, or dangerous tree. And ash trees have no equivalence because they've got to come down, mostly have to come down.
But I was also surprised, last time I talked to Yendi, she said nobody had taken advantage of the option to cut down a tree on your property. If you have no place to replace trees, well, you can deposit $500 into the village's trust fund.
Right.
And nobody had done that.
Right.
So
all
how does everybody
all
have
of those
space?
trees became exempt.
That's right. No,
But
it's
that's why
just,
we need
they're
to-
replacing them on their property, but,
But
they're
then there's
cutting
no
them down
follow-up.
because they don't have room for them in the first place.
So the replacement requirement is an area that we've noticed a lot of chatter in terms of what we replace and how we replace it. Part of it comes back to the exemptions. Part of it comes back to most of the towns will work with a sliding scale based on the size of the tree that's been removed, as opposed to our just one for one. So again, this is an area that we would need to sit down and go through the rules and see what works best for our community and develop. There are 565 municipalities in New Jersey, and I'll bet you there are 565 interpretations of the sliding scale. We should be picking one that works for us, and whatever else we think would be necessary to prove that, in fact, a tree was purchased if it doesn't go through the village's replacement program. So
If I'm not mistaken, our master plan suggests going to a sliding scale. Or at least in my conversations with our village planner, he has said that that's a better way to go, value for value, in terms of equating what you're cutting down with what you're putting in.
it's a very common approach. Of the 10 towns that I looked at, I would say at least 8 of them use a sliding scale. Enforcement. This is the second issue that I consider to be a systemic issue. We need to work on, again, the Planning Board and Board of Adjustment. We need to really assign somebody to be responsible for the canopy protection. This requires manpower, whether it be redefining existing jobs or whether it be hiring outside of current employees or whether it be creating a new position or a part-time position. There's no way to get around it. I'll be that blunt about it. There's no way to get around it. I know the budgeting process is going on now, and this is a good time to bring this issue up. Consider it as you go through your budget process, because without having the enforcement, without having the people, engineering is doing a great job with what they have and what they can do. But they don't have the manpower to take those couple of extra steps that would make this a better plan. So the other issue that we do is we have to address the categories of what is an exception to the tree. So, we start talking about invasives, we start talking about dead trees, we start talking about special trees, and before you know it, we have no trees to replace because everything's exempt. We need to redefine that very specifically. For example, with invasive trees, why don't we have a replacement quality requirement on a invasive tree. Just because it's invasive, it's still producing, it's still working to do what trees do, protect give it shade, help the water supply. And by the way, most of the rules that are being written for trees now are coming out of the Department of, the DEP's Department of Stormwater Management. Stormwater management happens to be something that we should all be interested in here. It is in fact part of the flooding issue solution. So we need to take a hard look at what is an exempt tree. That's part of the changes that we have to make. We can go on to the next one. I don't want to. Fees, penalties, whatever, that's strictly within the village manager's domain. The only question we would raise would be, are there other areas that need to be looked at in terms of assigning a fee to it? So if the planning board is in fact going to be spending the extra time and effort to inspect trees and what have you, should we have an increase in the fee for those particular services? Or should we add a survey fee? There are things that need to be looked at. I'm not saying you have to go out and charge everybody for it, but these are, again, are within the next discussion of next steps. We've seen this one before. And so the three things that we're asking for, suggesting, is that we go back to the rules and enhance the tree protection capabilities within the Planning Board and Board of Adjustment. We're asking for better management, which means more specific manpower directed to dealing with the issue. And we're asking for an improvement to the best practices. Done that as quickly as possible.
George, thank you so much. That was such a comprehensive presentation. We appreciate the outline that you distributed and you put up on the screen. And obviously, you've got your work cut out for you. Questions or comments from the council?
Thank you for working on this for years and years and years.
I just want to make sure that, because I think there's a little concern that they move forward, that everyone's pretty on board with the major points, and then we'll go down the tree rabbit hole of conifers and all that in subcommittee and come back, but.
Right. So I have a question about the subcommittee. I mean, I'd like to be on it. I don't know.
Totally.
Who else?
Well, I mean, I think I have to be.
Oh, yeah.
Right. I mean, so only
mean,
two of us can.
Yeah.
So it's
What about the
really
village?
bet-
What
it's really
about the
between-
village manager? Would he be on the subcommittee as well?
Sure. And Matt, I mean, I think it's easier as long as we have the broad strokes of enforcement and, going that way, and then discussing the staff, and then evenness. I mean,
Yeah,
that seems to be
I think maybe we should get together offline
Yeah.
and sort of define what parts of the ordinance we should include different groups.
Sure.
I think as far as, the tree aspect of it, right, should probably be talked about with Shade Tree. The enforcement, the staff aspect of it, myself, department heads, supervisors, things of that nature. So we can sort of generate a plan from here.
I'm fine. I also just want to say to everybody, I want to thank Kevin, who's not here, and I always joke with Mayor Paul and my Shade Tree Commission, they did this PowerPoint all by themselves with our brand-new Shade Tree member, and we didn't need to help them at all, and I'm very grateful to her, and she's home not feeling well, so I hope she's watching, and thank you.
All
Great.
right?
Thanks, George.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you
Tim.
both. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Kevin.
Mayor, moving forward with the agenda, I know there was a request that item D1 under policy, which is the manner of addressing the governing body and decorum, be moved up as the first discussion item tonight. So I'm going to move that up above budget, and I'll leave it to the council to start that discussion. I will note that there was an October 5th memorandum that I prepared after a previous discussion at a council meeting that outlined 6 different municipalities, and I provided copies of their ordinances covering this topic for the council's consideration.
Thank you, Keith. And who wants to start this off? Okay, I'll start this off. I know that we just revised our ordinance, and I know that we've had several discussions here involving decorum, let's just call it. And I know that we've also discussed this with Matt in terms of the limits of the ordinances that we can pass. Let's start with, what is the council looking for? And anybody can jump in, because we have it's my understanding that our recently revised ordinance on this goes about as far legally as we can. And there may be some places where we can tweak it, but what is it we're looking to do? Because we have in our revised ordinance that no person shall address any disruptive, accusatory, or threatening remarks, and that comments from the public shall not be personally offensive, abusive, or threatening. So what is it we're hoping to achieve? And then let's address those comments to Matt to see if they are doing.
Doesn't mean you're going to be abusive to me. It just means that you're going to ask the questions of me. So.
No, but we may be
Or maybe you might be abusive.
personally offensive.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I think the way it's worded now is fine for members of the public that are coming to make a comment. I mean, that's all fine. I think the reason why we brought this up were incidences that happened not at the microphone.
okay. Well, I think, is that what we're focusing on, so that we all understand where it is we'd like to get, so that perhaps these restrictions, let's just call them, apply to everyone in the audience. Is that what we're looking to do?
I think so. I mean, listen, my overarching concern is I have a lot of faith in this current council that we will be fair and we will have a pretty thick skin. I'm concerned about setting precedent in the future for setting a low bar to exclude people from these meetings. I think that should be the absolute last thing we ever do. There should be an incredibly high bar to deny somebody the ability to attend the council meeting and to speak at a council meeting. I appreciate, and I don't, Keith had done this, looking at some of what the other surrounding towns had done. I think our language does make that out. I would be supportive. Well, actually, let me ask this question of Matt. I always assumed that there was some inherent power.
If you could speak more into the mic.
Sorry.
Thank you.
I always assumed that there was some inherent power of the chair to control the room, even if it's not said here, in terms of maintaining order. I have no objection to adding in language that codifies that. Again, assuming it is an incredibly high bar. But is that something we even need, or is that something that's inherent in whomever the chair's powers, who is leading the meeting?
I think in our ordinances right now, we have the chair presiding over the mayor presiding over the meetings. And in fact, in decorum 320B, it says police chief shall upon request of the chair. And so the chair really runs it, and I think that's one thing that we've identified as the way to go about it. I think I've read through the other towns that Keith provided, the ordinances from the other towns. We're pretty consistent, but we've experienced something that's a little different than just coming from the podium, which is behavior from the people that are in attendance, or, and I'll get to it in a minute, even in remote, people who are in attendance that is disturbing or threatening to the meeting. And the ability, the overriding principle here is the ability of the municipal governing body to conduct its business and run its business. You don't get a right to speak at a public meeting in front of a council as a result of the First Amendment. It comes about as a result of the Open Public Meetings Act. And because of that, it's couched in the fact that the council has to be able to conduct its business, complete its business, and that's why there's rules with regard to, normally you can't get after the wording or the actual content of what's being said. But in an open public meeting situation, you can if it's threatening, disturbing, aggressive, that type of offensive language. So you can do that, and those are the parameters that are set. Like most municipalities, everybody always expected it to come from the chair, but we've experienced something different, so expanding it to the people that are in the audience, and expanding it, there was a case recently that came down where a town had to disband its remote meetings because someone hacked into their remote meeting and wouldn't let go of making, making profane language, making comments about people, very offensive, very threatening type things. So they had to fix that, and that was one of the things that they had to do in order to be able to conduct a meeting, but the rule is that you can't conduct a meeting unless you give people the opportunity for access. So that's an overriding principle that's well settled in the courts, that if you're going to have a public meeting, you got to give access to the public. So it's a balancing test in there, but I think one of the things that we could do is to expand it to deal with everyone who's in attendance or even somebody remotely. So that's something we can do.
And I think that that's, I'm so sorry.
I was going to say, I mean, to the extent, like, theoretically had somebody standing in the back of the room who was just screaming their head off, and it made it difficult for us to conduct business or hear from a speaker or just do anything. Is there no power right now of this council or whoever's chairing to simply, kick that person out? I mean, is that something we actually have to specify in an ordinance?
Well, you do have the ability, and you could be justified depending upon the facts. Having it codified in an ordinance certainly helps a lot better. We deal with people speaking and addressing the council. That is not necessarily always what happens. So we could, if somebody sits in the back of the room and starts yelling things at the council while somebody else is talking, or there's a presentation going on, that can be disruptive and that can be controlled. But we have to be able to, I think putting it into our ordinances helps us with the authority on that.
So my big concern, and I will stop after this because I realize I'm 105, is somebody's definition of disruptive can change.
Right.
And I have seen things here that I don't like, but we have to allow.
Right.
Right? Lots of people showing up with T-shirts, people showing up with signs. I don't like some of that, but you have a right to do it. And I want to make sure that if we draft something, that we define disruptive to make sure that it's, again, a high burden, a high bar before we can actually act upon it. It's got to be something more that we don't find offensive, but something, to your point, that really impedes our ability to hold the meeting.
And the courts have already dealt with that, and they say disruptive is a subjective test. But the test is reasonably perceived. Now, there's a lot of different tests in law and thresholds that have to be met, but it allows for that subjective aspect in terms of being able to have a council reasonably perceive that it is disruptive or threatening, and that's the test line. And that seems to be what the courts have based their opinions on.
And to follow up on Evan's thoughts on this, so I have two areas. One is, it sounds like everyone, and correct me if I'm wrong, is in favor of expanding what we have as our manner of addressing the council to the manner in which to conduct yourself in a council chamber while a council meeting is going on. Does that sound right?
Yep.
So, and in terms of disruptive behavior, and Matt, you and I have had this discussion. Did you, please correct me if I'm wrong, didn't you tell me that while we can expel someone from a particular meeting if they are being disruptive or personally offensive, and they continue it after being admonished not to, that the limit, that would be the limit. That would be the extreme situation. We cannot expel them from future meetings. Is that the status?
Pretty much the case. There hasn't been any case law with regard to it. There was a major case out of Morristown that dealt with a public library and trying to prevent someone from ever coming back to the library. And it had to do with someone who was homeless, obviously had an odorous presence about him, was accosting people, doing things such as that, had been warned, and Morristown Library, I believe, tried to ban him from the library. And constitutionally, you weren't going to be allowed to do that because it was a public place. So banning somebody forever or for a period of time is a significant step that I haven't seen anybody take. I haven't seen any place where that is allowed or permitted. Usually what they do in most of the ordinances and what they suggest is that you bring the person, have the person address the issue of the disruptive behavior and ask if they're going to continue it. If they're going to continue it, then you have the perfect right to make sure that they don't spend any more time that night in the meeting. But
Right.
if they agree to discontinue it, you can decide as a council to let them back in.
So and just so we understand going forward, if the chair determines subjectively that someone is being disruptive, they can be expelled.
Yes, reasonably perceived to
Right,
be disruptive.
right. And, but then the chair could entertain a motion from someone on the council to ask that person back in and question them to say, okay, are we good? You're gonna, you're gonna sit quietly, you're gonna be okay. And that would be by a majority vote of the council.
That's a perfectly acceptable process, and the chair could do it on their own. It doesn't have to be a motion by someone.
Got it. However, regardless of the behavior, and let's assume for just a moment it was especially egregious, we cannot ban that person from even the next meeting. Is that correct?
True, and there's even been cases in other towns in Bergen County where there's been fights at the meetings.
So a person who started a fight and caused injury and was charged with battery would be allowed to come back to the next meeting?
Yes, possibly, yes,
But-
as long as they agree to do it.
So I never practiced state criminal law in New Jersey, but when I did in New York, I know that someone who was charged with a crime, a condition of bail would be not to return to the scene.
Well, they could.
I mean, so even though we don't do it, I'm assuming a court, if something like Paul's situation happened, right?
Yeah,
Please don't call it my situation.
The one you described, you know what I mean.
the one I was being, accused of, yes. Yes, a judge could make that decision. You could actually, if you wanted to, depending upon the nature of the behavior, apply to the court to get an injunction to prevent that person from coming back. And the judge would make the determination. But you can't then and there make that decision.
Right.
You have to put those facts before the
So-
court.
But that gives me comfort, because that's a pretty extraordinary measure, which is to me exactly what it should be, like
Right.
an extraordinary measure. Okay.
Just by way of example, Mayor, there was a situation in Passaic County, I believe it was at a Board of Education meeting, where the president of the school board removed somebody, asked somebody to leave, and that person actually turned around and sued the district, and through a settlement agreement, I believe it was actually granted damages. So it does work in the reverse too, where if the governing body or the chair of the board or commission or mayor and council, goes too far,
Is deemed to be unreasonable.
right, that there could be exposure, for the government agency as well.
Right.
So one of the things we should talk about, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in the ordinance, but what do you do when something like that happens? And you try and calm it down, you try and make it subside, you stop it, you can tell the person, either you stop it or you're going out, and if they don't stop it, then you can you can call for the police to help you with that. Then you can say to them, if you discontinue it, we'll let you stay, and if the person says no or yes, or doesn't continues to act the way it does, then you can ask them to be taken away.
Got it. Well, I think we have some pretty bright lines here, that we know what the limits of our authority are as a council, and I think we're all in agreement that we would like to, whether it's by resolution or ordinance or whatever you recommend, Matt, an ordinance, expand this ordinance to apply to all persons present at a council meeting. And that would include anyone present through hybrid access.
And not to prolong this, but do we just want to include village council meetings, or do you want to go to, planning board meetings, zoning board meetings?
I think that's
Other public meetings
very good
that
point.
fall under the open public meetings law within the village?
Very, very good point. And to go further, what about committee hearings?
Yeah.
Or committee meetings? They're not hearings because they're informal. So, Matt, I mean,
Again, many
Okay?
Which is that any meeting in which the Open Public Meetings Act controls, this should be the.
Got it. Then, Matt, would you bring us back a sample ordinance that we can take a look at?
We know that our timing right now wouldn't be able to be really introduced until it's getting to January, but maybe it's something to do.
It's more important to get this right than get it quick. But again, I would just ask that when you do it, high bar, and to me, the focus is really impeding our ability to hold the meeting as opposed to anything else.
Well, but it really sounds like it's simply applying this standard to anyone present at a public meeting. Exactly. Yeah, so I that was actually pretty straightforward for me.
Okay.
Good.
Good.
All
Move
set?
on? Okay.
Let's
All
go.
right, the next agenda item under item C, which is budget, I'd like to ask Chief John Judge from the Ridgewood Fire Department to come forward to talk about recommended changes to our ambulance fee schedule. Chief Judge, welcome.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. How are you? Good evening.
Good to see you, John.
Hi.
You as well. During the process we've been doing about the RFP, the request for proposal for the new billing service, we've been looking at everything with that. One of the things we noticed is reviewing our current billing charges that we have. They were raised in 2017. However, when I looked at them again, I realized we are substantially under what the hospitals around us are charging for the same service. So our current fee is $750. The hospitals around us are charging between $1,511 and $1,800, including Valley, Hackensack, St. Clair's. Our mileage cost is $18 per mile, excuse me. Hospitals around us are $30 to $44 a mile. So the recommendation would be to increase our BLS and 911 fees to $1,500, our mileage fee to $30. Our BLS non-emergency, we'd have to write as $1,500, which we don't do. That's pretty much a interfacility transport. We don't do those anyway, but we have them on there just in case. And then the BLS treatment, no transport, which is $125, and the oxygen fees would remain the same. The important thing to note, part of this procedure too, is we took a better look at how we are charging our residents. So I've recently received 2 phone calls from 2 residents I was unhappy about. They both received bills and were very concerned about not being able to pay them. Our policy's always been the residents aren't responsible. However, despite it being on the website and talked about here and things like that, they don't seem to know.
Wait, did you say they aren't responsible?
They are not, no, they are not.
Yeah.
Our residents are not responsible for co-pays.
Right.
So,
For an ambulance
so
bill.
whether it was the $750 or the $1,500,
Correct,
they don't owe us any money.
correct.
Well, but we asked insurance, if insurance doesn't pay, then they don't owe us money, right?
As well, so I'm gonna go over that in 1 second, yes.
Okay.
So the problem was, I guess the message wasn't getting out there.
Sure.
So I mentioned that Keith is a concern that, you might have one resident who gets a bill and says, oh, I'll be on top of this and pay it, and another one who is waiting and waiting and waiting, and then it gets canceled out, which it was anyway, and they just didn't know. And I was like, this doesn't work. So I reached out to the attorney as well and asked about how the law works, at Keith's recommendation. And what he said was, Medicare requires you to send a bill, right, for insurance and co-payment. However, if a resident pays taxes, and those taxes goes towards your ambulance service, then that covers the legal requirement of sending them a bill. So we don't even have to send anything to them. So you have the insurance payment and nothing to the resident.
The patient portion is essentially
Correct.
covered by their contribution to the property taxes
Correct.
within the village.
That is the legal
whereas that
coverage
would not be,
of it.
that would not be the case for someone who lives outside of the village where we
Correct.
provide any type of mutual aid.
Now, 2 things with that. If it was a agreed upon mutual aid in terms of, let's say, a town X was like, hey, Ridgewood, can you cover us? That subsidy they pay would also cover that co-payment legally. However, if it's just a non-Ridgewood resident, they would be responsible for the co-pay. However, that also is the point of what we want to do for that. That is our discretion. We have to make a good faith effort on collecting that co-payment, but we don't have to put them in collections.
We send this letter to them?
So what happens is the billing company gets the bill.
Okay.
They get the insurance payment. The balance then goes to the patient.
Oh,
Got it.
okay.
What was happening was our own residents were getting these balances that weren't due, but not knowing this.
Right.
And getting, even if and they were concerned about that.
Mhm.
It finally would get cleared out, and I was like, this isn't working correctly. However, a non-resident will get the bill and is responsible. It is our choice here of how we want to go about collecting that.
So essentially, we were trying to get the difference that insurance had not paid. It sounds like we were mistaken when we were trying to bill the Ridgewood residents for the difference, right?
And it always got cleared out, right, it always got cleared out to
Right.
0, but it wasn't clear from the beginning, which I didn't feel was appropriate.
Do we have a disclaimer on that bill? I mean, when it first goes out, you know.
I think what John is proposing is that as a policy,
We
we
not
will
send
no
it?
longer, in
Not even
addition
send the
to
bill.
Great.
increasing the rates, we will now no longer send out that bill
Right.
to residents.
Or you can send out the bill that says 0 and says no copay based on village resident,
Yeah,
however we
right.
want to do that.
Yeah.
Sure.
And then based on the non-residents, we can decide how we want to do that. You can either, you have to make legally a good faith effort, but we don't have to send them to collections.
And I would recommend
is a
that in
that is for us
talking
to
to the
decide.
new billing company, once that's awarded, and our legal counsel in this area, that we collectively, John and I, sit with them and decide what the best practice would be for that.
And same policy if somebody's uninsured, I assume?
So, so we have the ability to set up a hardship waiver program
Mhm.
as well. So that would allow anyone who cannot pay on a case-by-case basis to reach out and to just cancel that out as well. And there are plenty of calls we go on that are not billable. These are
That are not what?
not billable calls, meaning there's no medical necessity to have an ambulance. But if you call, you get an ambulance, and if you want to go, we bring you. We understand that there are people who just do not qualify. If you call the ambulance because you stubbed your toe and you want to go, okay, you walk to the ambulance, you're going. Insurance is not going to cover that. We all know that. That doesn't get a bill. They don't get a copay. That still is just a
Mhm.
washed, situation, if you will. The only thing, I guess, then to maybe not move forward with right now is in the request to amend ordinance 3617, when I sent it in, there was a section that talks about outstanding balances and what to do with that. This is from the previous ordinance. It's kind of the part right up here. And that was my question of how we wanted to address that, because I didn't know how we wanted to do with the collection part. So maybe this gets held until we do the whole RFP and everything else is
Yeah.
one.
Right. I think at this point, it would be my recommendation that we modify by ordinance the billables, the amount to be billed, so that we are competitive with other services in the area. And then, once we have awarded the bid on the billing company, and are able to consult with the attorney on this issue, I think then we'll come back and modify the ordinance relative to how we handle the collection verbiage in the law.
So, John, I want to just begin by commenting that, we went through this budget process just a few months ago, and I remember when we said we need to find money, and you looked at our rates at the time and found that we were very low on a number of our services. And now you took it to the next level and found that we were less than half of what everyone else is. And I also will note that the prices that you raised these to are the bottom of the range, the absolute bottom of that range. So I commend you for all of that. I commend you for the recommendation that we make sure we do not send bills to residents. And now I have a question, which is, did you make a projection of what you think the additional revenue to the village will be?
No, I will say no, because right now, part of the reason the new billing company is there are questions as to the current projections being right as they are. I think there's too many variables changing, if that makes sense, in terms of how calls are currently processed, how they're getting billed, what the follow-up is, and there's too many variables right now, and I think I'm just trying to fix those variables one by one to get a better overall projection, but right now it's.
And through you, Mayor, from a budgeting standpoint, just to full disclosure, while this will make a marked difference in what we would collect in '24 if this were introduced and adopted by the council, From an anticipated revenue standpoint, we cannot anticipate more revenue in a specific line item than we took in the prior year. So the benefits from a budgeting standpoint, not from a receivable standpoint, but from a budgeting standpoint, you wouldn't be able to anticipate the higher rates until the 25 budget.
I understand that, and what I would like to learn at some point, whether it's a year down the road or 6 months down the road, whenever it is that you can estimate what it is that this will bring in, I think this council would like to know, and again, there's obviously no timeline on this. You'll know when it's time to get back to us, but I think that this is, this has been sitting at this price so low for so long, and I just want to see how, there's always more money in there, and you went out and found it, and I'd like to find out at some point how much you found.
So John, I just have a quick, it's
Yes.
kind of like a follow-up question and maybe the same answer. I'm just curious. I mean, I really would have not thought that you go on many calls that are non-residents. Like, is there any data on the percentage of,
I could probably run reports in terms of, what zip code of resident, if you will, or where they're from. But it's mainly if you have a visitor to town or accident on the highway or something like that.
But even for the residents, we'll make more money because the insurance, I'm assuming, will pay more. And of course, insurance doesn't pay the whole thing, we know that, but if they,
Right.
let's just pick a number that they pay 50%. 50% of 1,500 is
Right.
twice as much as 50% of 750.
Right.
So we're gonna get, I'm gonna guess that we're gonna get more money from this, from insurance, from our residents, without hitting our residents for any money.
right.
Right.
And I will say, it was years ago, it was probably close to 10 years ago. And I don't even remember who in my family, but there was a family member that needed an ambulance. I got a bill from the insurance company. I think it was like $800. I paid it. And then a few months later, I got a check in the mail and said, we don't charge residents. So that's, I mean, I've
My
known,
question
and
is why
that's
you
the
even got
only
the bill to
reason I
begin with
knew.
then. Right, why should you even have gotten it? It should never have got to that point where you're putting the stress on the resident, they're seeing this thing they can't afford, they're on a fixed income, and now we're stressing them out unnecessarily with a bill they didn't have to pay to begin with.
Well, and as Keith said, the residents are paying for this through their taxes.
Absolutely.
So this is the benefit of
And
for
these
the
billing
residents.
companies do have different practices that they abide by, so that's why I think it is important for us to wait on that aspect of this until we have an awardee, and then be able to sit down with them, understand what their, philosophies and practices are, because I'm sure we're not the only municipality that they would ultimately serve, and then we'll come back with a recommendation on that end. But I would strongly recommend moving forward on the rate change.
Everybody good?
Yep.
John, thank you so much.
Thank you all, have a good night.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chief. Okay, item 2 are the first round of 2023 budget transfers. Current fund, a total of $139,000. Water utility fund, total of $169,212. And parking utility fund, total of $13,890. After November 1st, we'll be able to begin the transfer process to make sure that we can move funds around in the budget to be able to keep us whole for the rest of the year. Any objections?
All good.
Okay. Item 3 under budget is the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection Settlement Agreement on a notice of violation that we received back in February, from an inspection that was held back in February of 2023. The original penalty for this, and this is related to the central garage fuel storage tanks, was $15,000. Thanks to Chris Rudisizer and his staff, they were able to negotiate this down to $7,500. Chris is still here tonight in case anybody has any specific questions to this issue.
Just one. Have we remediated this so we won't get fined again?
Well, we're actually looking to make a major capital investment in repairing this from stem to stern.
Okay.
But if you have specific questions
No,
about
as
that
long
project.
as long as we don't think this is going to happen again, I'm okay with it.
Understood. All right. Okay. Moving on to award of contract for the heating unit for the EMS facility located at 33 Douglas Place. This is a contract that would be awarded to Wallington Plumbing and Heating for $29,094.44. Any questions on this?
I just had a quick question, because just based on the estimates, like the Wallington one, it just gives the brand name and it, I don't know any of the technicalities, but it's very minimal. It's like a couple of sentences, couple of lines. And the other estimates are like a page of information. So I just want to make sure we're comparing apples to apples.
I mean, I'll defer to Chris on the specifics of that. I can tell you, I think how the estimates are prepared are by the individual companies, and whatever system they're using to prepare those estimates come on an individual basis. But Chris, you want to share a little bit more on that topic?
Good evening again. Traffic and Signal Division solicited the quotes. We're recommending award to the lowest quote. It's for the purchase of the unit. The Signal Division will do the installation. So we're merely buying the unit. Rich Talton, he did the grunt work. He's satisfied with his recommendation, and I concur.
Okay, because I'm just saying on the Johnstone Supply, it says, steel heat exchanger, steel burner, stainless steel drip pan, blah, 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 all this stuff. Are we gonna get that from Wallington, or do we need that from Wallington? I don't want it to come back and say we need extra because we didn't realize it didn't include the drip pan, or it didn't include, any of these other things.
The units they're selected by how many BTU or how much heat they'll produce. They're a little different, each one of them. Perhaps one vendor wanted to tout their specialities, their differences, whereas the other one said, it's a heating unit, you put it on, it makes heat.
Well, I mean, it's for the same it says Resner RPB 350, and then the Johnstone Supply is also a Resner RPB 350. But then it has a lot of information after. I mean, I'm just asking because I don't know, but it just seemed like a totally different quote. Like a lot more things were included in the Johnstone than the Wallington.
They're not exactly the same units.
They're not?
No.
Okay.
We're buying apples. One might be a Gala, one might be a Macintosh, one might be a Delicious, but the end result is you still have apples. In this case, we still have a heating unit.
Okay. You're the
Good
expert.
illustration.
Thank you.
Chris, I'm starting to hear about heat pumps as being better for the environment. Is that something that we could consider here?
Sure, provide the money.
Are they better for the environment? Do they operate on electricity instead of, what is this operating on? Diesel,
No, that should be natural gas.
natural gas? Okay.
As a majority of our purchases are, we are trained as municipal employees to get the lowest price. However it is, whether it's diesel, natural gas, or electricity driven. I mean, generally electric heat is more costly. Natural gas is one of the most
To buy the
inexpensive.
apparatus is more costly?
No, to run it.
Ah.
Yeah, we have people who've done heat pumps and so forth. You can do those, but there is a cost difference.
All right, thank you.
Other questions?
Okay, Chris, you might as well hang here, because under policy, you have two items. So, award of contract under item 5, upgrades to desktop computers, monitors, and webcams. This is being recommended by Dylan Hansen, our IT director. Obviously, with current conditions and the need to make sure that our employees are accessible with webcams to Zoom and upgraded computers and software, the recommendation is to award this contract to Dell in the amount of $65,695.90.
How old are the computers we're replacing?
I think it varies. Dylan's here if he wants to come up.
Good evening. So some of the computers are going to be for new employees, but we are replacing computers 7+ years old.
Is there any, I mean, It's a lot of money. Is there no cheaper way to do this? I mean,
By the time you put the-
$65,000 is not, is not insignificant.
That includes the operating system, so there's a fee for that. That includes memory, hard drives,
The
and
webcam, I see it, yeah, but still.
inflation has caused things to go up.
And I will say, Councilman, that Evan, Dylan is, you're Evan, he's Dylan. Dylan is very thoughtful about requests for hardware or even software upgrades by individual employees. One of the things I dealt with on my first day, and I think I inherited this from Heather, was a lot of employees were looking for dual monitors. Unless there's a true need for them to have a dual monitor based on their position, they've been denied that request if it wasn't an absolute necessity. So, you know, he is very frugal about replacement, but when it's needed, it's needed. And, you know, with 300 employees here, we need to make sure that our technological needs of our staff are met.
Dylan, are these in the budget?
Yes.
Other questions?
Other questions?
Evan?
I'm going to put a Zoom invite on your calendar in a couple of months to make sure how good these cameras are.
We'll provide you an inventory.
Not a problem.
Thank you, Dylan.
Sounds good. Before we move on, it's been pointed out to me that when we were doing our, where is it? Shade Tree Commission updates to tree ordinance and Big Tree Heritage Tree, we did not cover that.
Mayor, would you mind if we did the two policy issues so that Chris
I
can
don't,
excuse
I
himself?
don't mind at all.
I'm sorry, you control the agenda.
No,
I defer
I'm
to
good.
you.
I'm good.
But I know the engineer was here last night late at a Board of Adjustment meeting, and I'm trying to not
Let's
have
get
him
him outta
here
here.
as late as he was last night. So, item D2 is the location of the Christmas tree in the Central Business District. I know that was discussed. It was brought up by a resident, and then it was discussed amongst the council. I did ask Chris to do some preliminary investigation as to utilities in that area and whether it was conducive for this type of use. So, Chris, if you want to share what you know so far, I know there's more to do with the village council.
As I understand the location, I took a look at the utilities we're responsible for in engineering, and that would be the sanitary sewer system. We do have a 10-inch trunk main in that general area. I'd be very leery of planting a tree near there. The pipe is most likely what is known as a VCP, vitrified clay pipe. They're usually in 4-foot sections. The joints are usually loose and old, and I'd worry very much if a tree roots got in it and clogged it up. Additionally, that is the area that has underground electric, so before the village went too far with this suggestion, I'd recommend a utility mark out to see what we have. Underground electric, telecommunications, natural gas, and of course, Ridgewood Water's water system.
Questions?
Well, personally, I don't think that's a good location to plant a tree, just because as it gets bigger and bigger, I mean, it's a small area, and the storefronts in the area, you know, to have a tree there for a month, it's fine. To have it there all year, when it gets big, I think it would be very intrusive. I was thinking more, you know, if you're facing the parking lot, the whole, to the right of it, there's a grassy area, maybe over there. I was there today. When I looked at it, I mean, it's really not the same as you're driving up or walking up East Ridgewood Avenue, seeing the tree, versus you wouldn't see it until you're already at the intersection of Broad and East Ridgewood. So I don't think that's a great area either, even if we could. I don't know if the trunk line goes underneath the parking lot and goes, you know, under the ground by the grass there. Do you have any idea?
Not offhand. We'd have to check our maps. As I said, it's not just the sanitary sewer system. It's any one of a number of utilities. We'd have to make sure that we don't have a conflict.
What I would want to make sure, because I've heard differing stories that every tree we get is a tree that was already going to be cut down. And then I hear other things that say, no, these people were pressured, you know, there was a tree in their backyard, they, you know, had a knock on their door or a letter, do you want to donate your tree? And you know, there was some sort of pressure involved. I don't know if it's true, if it's not, but I would like to know that every tree we get was going to be a tree that was going to be cut down for some reason or another.
And I can comment on that. I've been doing this for 15 years, since about 2008, and any stories about anybody getting a letter or anybody knocking on their door are false. It just doesn't happen. Every tree that has been used since 2008, I can't comment before then, we put out a notice, the village puts out a notice saying, we're looking for trees. And we get people coming to us saying, I got a tree I want to take down. And they reach out to us. Very few of those trees are actually used, if any. What usually happens is Downs Tree Service does this for several towns. They're always on the lookout for a tree that will fit each town's needs, placement, size, all of that. And so what they will say they'll get a call from a potential customer saying, I need to take this tree down. And maybe it's June. And they'll say to them, if we can take it down in November, we can do it for a drastically reduced cost.
For free.
Or for free.
I want to add to this,
Wait, let me
because
just-
I
let me
can go
just-
back
let me
to
just-
2005.
Let me just finish this thought. Every tree, unequivocally, that we have used since 2008, or whatever year it was, might have been 9 or 7, but something like that, was on its way to the mulch pile. Every tree that we used on its way to the mulch pile just made a stop in Ridgewood for a month or 6 weeks. Every tree, unequivocally. And so any stories about I want to hear somebody who said they got a letter.
No,
Because
I'm
it
not
di- it-
saying
yeah,
definitely
it
let, I'm
didn't-
just,
it
some
didn't
sort
happen.
of,
It didn't happen. These are, and again, Downs Tree Service does it for free. They do it, and by the way, they didn't ask for that sign to be put up in front of the tree. When I first did this, I was so moved by their generosity, I commissioned the sign. It was a surprise to them. They had no idea, and I thought it was the least the village could do to thank them so that they could be recognized as having done a good Christmas deed. So that's the status. If you want to look at a different location or something else, that's up to the council. I don't really understand. I mean, one of the things about putting a tree in a place that will, as you said, maybe it's not too small, maybe the place isn't too small today, but at some point, it's probably going to be too small. And so that means that you are now spending a lot of money to put that up. If you take Downs out of it, now we have to trim it, as we did previously for many years. So our crew is out there in bucket trucks. And then at some point, whether it's a couple of decades down the road, that tree may get cut down. So if that's the avenue you want to pursue, that's fine.
no, that's why I was saying, if we could find an area that was big enough that, it's never going to, decades and decades.
Could I add some thoughts? Sorry.
Go ahead.
So,
Sure.
one, I just want to say amongst us, not in a critical way, I was sort of surprised to see this on the agenda without any backup, and I want to thank Chris because, I went out to explore the idea with Seamus, the dog, and I was shocked at how many utilities were pumped into that small section. So I agree with you. I think, not like you need me to, but it's the wrong area for all the reasons that Chris cited, and I think we probably should have done a little bit more of that investigation. And so while that's for a physical tree to be planted, I think it's the wrong area. But for our town, we have learned from when we moved into the park, that's the exact right area for everybody. It's visible from the west side. Everyone loves it. It's steeped in tradition. And that area, it's just Ridgewood and Christmas. And I would be very concerned to disrupt that by finding another area, which I don't think we have. Ultimately, when we move it, the holiday outside of everything is a big business generation, and we need to make sure that we maintain this tradition. We're actually bringing back the tradition of the kissing balls, so it'll be more well-organized. And I want to add, because I love this story, and I told Pam it, when we bought our house in 2005, I was super pregnant with Chloe Winograd, and we had to take down this very large Christmas tree in our yard. And they came, and Mike was, doing something else, I think maybe it was with Liam, and they told me, this is the perfect Christmas tree for Ridgewood, and we'll take it down for free. And I was like, this is awesome. And we were the lead Christmas tree for forever. And then they came, and they measured, and they talked about the truck, and Liam was so excited, and I was like getting more pregnant by the day. And then they called me, and they said, well, we found an area that it would be easier to access because there's too many wires in the historic neighborhood, and you're no longer the #1 Christmas tree. So it is true. They did not solicit me. We were taking the tree down because it was a hazard to the baby's room. And I told Pam that story, so that gets us to 2005. And I do want to say thank you to Downs, because I think they're incredibly generous. And I want to thank you to everybody who makes this happen, and for Chris for answering all the technical questions about the utilities.
I've had questions about this for years, and when I saw the cut tree put up, I always felt chagrined. But hearing Siobhan's story, I'm just relieved.
You're good? So what is the council's pleasure in terms of proceeding on this?
Let's just do what we've done in the past few years.
I'm fine.
Good? Great.
Okay.
Great. Chris,
And
thank you
then,
so much.
And then the next policy discussion is with regard to the Ridgewood Bus Station. What we've done is I asked Heather to put together a small history of correspondence, which was provided to the council with their packet. There are photos included in there. I think Dylan has the ability to also put some of the photos up here on the screen. And Chris, if you could just walk us through very briefly, I realize it's getting late, but if you could just walk us through briefly a real short synopsis of the history here, why we are why we are where we are as far as usage, or lack thereof, I should say, and also some of the structural or aesthetic concerns of the building.
This is the bus station or bus shelter, however you wish to refer to it. We had it looked at by Margaret Hickey from Conley and Hickey. She prepared an interesting history and memo on it. I hope that was in your packet. If not, I'll forward it over to Keith to circulate to you. It dates from the early 60s, if I recall. When you look at it currently, you'll see time has been harsh to it. A lot of the wood needs restoration, repainting. Some of the masonry is also crumbling. Currently, the bus station is closed or locked. We started to develop a problem a number of years ago with the people using the bus station. There were numerous incidences of urination, defecation. Our sewer department had to come out with the jet truck on numerous occasions and give the interior a high-pressure rinse. It was also a place where the police department found people hanging out at all hours of the night, and that's why we closed it. That doesn't do anything for the individuals that could use some shelter from the elements. A number of years ago, I approached the council at that time with a suggestion for putting up a typical New Jersey Transit-type bus shelter, generally a roof and 2 sides. Keep some of the wind, keep some of the rain and weather off you, but doesn't give you a cozy enough place to sleep the night. Never went anywhere. If the council wishes, I can reopen those discussions with Transit, see what they would provide to the village or not, and take it from there.
I'd be interested to see what you would propose replacing it. I don't know if there are pictures from somewhere else where we could see something similar that's standing currently, but I think it's worth pursuing.
They're pretty standard, Councilman. It's the 3-sided glass shelters, black pillars holding it up with the domed white roof. There are some more decorative versions of that in certain places, but generally speaking, they all have that same, Occupancy loads, maybe, what, Chris, 6 to 8 people under there on a good day?
8 people, you got to know each other.
Yeah.
So could I add a couple things here, just because Keith and I had, so thank you, Chris, and I don't have the Connolly and Hickey letter. Does anybody else?
Nor do I. I would like to
Yeah,
see
It is?
that.
It's not in
Okay,
the packet.
could you send that to all of us?
Sure.
So just briefly, because I'm new up here, and as you know, I walk by the bus station every day on my dog walk, and it has been an eyesore, unattractive, really deteriorated since the original proposal, which I think Pam and I were observers when that was presented. So when I started to look at it, I was thinking it's, a lot of things. I was talking to people about it, and I connected with Lynn Brady from HPC, who provided me with some interesting information about the architect. So it was designed by Robert Gilchrist in the 1960s, and it did win an award from the New Jersey American Institute of Architects. And I was like, that's interesting. It's got a long history. It is not deemed historic, but it's got like a nice little historical local story. J. Robert Gilchrist's son's name is John, and he was still alive. I have not spoken with him. And in 2019, give or take, I don't have it all detailed out, he prepared plans for the restoration, which were interesting. And from what I understand, the bulk of the cost for the restoration was the windows. And so when I met with Lynn, who was very gracious, and I have this history, and John Gilchrist came up with some meaningful information that's really poorly printed on my computer here. But he recommended keeping the existing structure, popping out the windows, to reduce the cost, sealing the floor, and turning it more into a shelter rather than an enclosure. And I thought this was really interesting, because originally I was like, oh, this thing's awful. And it has deteriorated into what I would still deem a pretty awful status. The containers that you sent, they're just not as charming, they're not as Ridgewood. It's a really critical, beautiful area. We've just invested in Mixood Circle. It's across from the World War I Memorial, which is it's just such an important corner. So what I was hoping, and then I invited Keith to come to the meeting to meet Lynn, because she's like a celebrity. And she's amazing. She's got such talents, we're so lucky.
Would you give a little bit of Lynn's background?
I don't have it here, but she is a Class A member of her HPC. She worked on the Gold Star Memorial. She's all business. She's full, I love it. She gave me a packet full of information, which I'm going to pass.
Here, let me jump in then.
Okay.
She is an architect of some renown who has designed a number of buildings for the city of New York, and they're beautiful buildings that again are in an older style. As opposed to contemporary style, so just that's her background.
And
this is her stuff.
the leverage here, she has a personal relationship with the son.
Yes.
So I thought that was advantageous.
They served on a board together.
And she provided me all of his information on his letterhead, and I gave it to Keith. So what I was thinking to kind of go this way is, it's clearly the bus station, I think the whole community, it's declined and in need of some love and attention from us. We need to improve it. I think that the modular structure were very functional, and NJT are not Ridgewood enough, and that we should move forward in pricing out the restoration of this building based upon Gilchrist Jr., he might not even be a junior, but just for the storytelling, and come back with the windows and without as two costs. And then I think Keith has something to say, because I just said a lot.
So I think the ask tonight, if the council is so inclined, is pretty much what Siobhan has summarized, and that is, do we want to move forward with putting a cost estimate together to rehab this building, make it more into a shelter than a location that gets fully closed and becomes more of a potential habitat for folks who don't have a place to go. But at the same time, in my discussions with the NJDOT, we do have some transportation funding from when we were operating the park and ride on Route 17. We're very limited in how we can spend those funds. We would require DOT approval. We required DOT approval to spend them when we ran the park and ride. To spend them now, we again would need DOT approval. But I would like permission from the council to enter into discussions with the Department of Transportation to see if they can reallocate permission for us to use some of those funds that we have for transportation needs to address the bus shelter, which would then take it out of, if we were approved, and I don't know if that's feasible or not, that's a discussion that's yet to be had, but if we were approved, that would take this off of our capital budget investment for next year.
Good idea.
No issue with free money. I would just ask that when you start to do that, I am interested in the points that the engineer raised about ensuring that it's functional.
Mhm.
I definitely want to, if we can preserve the aesthetic 100%, we totally should, and especially if we don't have to pay for it, even better. But I want to make sure that that, you know, it doesn't become another place for vagrants or other issues. And I'm, in my mind, trying to figure out what it'll look like or feel like without windows and in a closed building. I'm willing to hear that, but I want to make sure that at the same time we're talking about the history, we're focused on costs and we're focused on, pragmatism as well.
Right, and I do think that there's an element of discussion that needs to occur with the police department, from a lighting standpoint, from a security camera standpoint. These were not things that I think were, when it was open and functional, we didn't have that type of technology then. Now we'd have that type of technology. So even motion sensor lighting might be something that needs to be considered. But if there is an interest to prepare a cost estimate, Chris and I can have those conversations with Chief Lyons and his team downstairs to figure out how we both rehab the facility, but at the same time make sure that from a security standpoint, which has been problematic in the past, that we can abate those issues if we were to rehab it.
I personally think this is an excellent suggestion. As I look at this building from a distance, without those close-ups that show the extreme deterioration, it has beautiful lines. It fits wonderfully within our central business district. And if there's a way to do this, again, emphasizing to the designer, the new architect, that this was a problem, we need to design it so that it is not a problem in the future. And again, add technology, and as Evan said, and if it's free, if we can work out that end of it, then yeah, it's a no-brainer. So why don't we take a walk down that road and see how far we get? Everybody good with that?
Yeah. Oh, always better to restore and, renovate rather than replace.
And improve. Just one of the recommendations outside of all the physical structure was it is lacking in color. We could add more. I'm not talking, sorry, Heather, it's not going to be pink for you and I. It's going to, but more in keeping that it is a bit bland. So I'm going to give you this because it's all technical from the architect's son. And if you have any questions, let me know. I really can only
Actually,
help.
there's one question for the council to ponder. One of the problems I mentioned is that it attracts overnighters. One way to minimize that is, let's take the doors off.
Yeah.
Allow the wind to pass through. You still have enough walls and a roof to provide shelter from inclement weather without making it, shall we say, too cozy. But again, that's a decision that's up to you folks.
And are we comfortable with that? I agree with Chris's recommendation there, because this is a bus shelter. You're only supposed to be there for a limited amount of time while you're waiting for the bus to come. We don't want to invite this to be a place where people congregate. We want this to serve those people who are waiting for a bus on a cold winter's morning.
Agreed, and we should add some of the age-friendly benches as well, because the current benches are crumbling as well. We took pictures of that, but I think it's great. And if we find the money, even better.
And again, I can't make any guarantees that the DOT would approve this request, but I definitely think we should make it because we're limited to how we can spend those funds.
I'm going to support this, though I just want to voice a thought. In most civilized societies, we provide bathrooms for visitors. And if we want humans to visit in Ridgewood, we really should be providing bathrooms like they do in Japan, in London, in Paris. But they would have to, in our case, it would have to be manned or locked or charge $1 per entry, something like that. And I do think the current idea to take out the doors or the windows is probably the most expedient and useful.
Are we talking about taking out the doors and windows now while we're pending?
Well, no, I think what we're looking to do is put an estimate together.
Right.
Yeah.
That does not
Okay.
include doors at
Got it.
all, so there will be one side of the building that will be open and accessible. And then there'll be two options beyond that, one that includes windows on the three other sides of the building, and one that does not include windows, because windows are expensive, and we want to see how that pricing comes in based on engineering's estimate.
I will tell you, and I have had some experience with homeless people in the winter in the Central Business District. And again, I will defer to an architect. However, any area that is shielded, that you can't see through,
It's a problem.
even if there are open areas, will absolutely be a problem because it breaks the wind, it stops the rain. And again, I'm not a designer by any means. There's going to have to be a lot of glass on whatever.
And
we
I
do.
think that's why we want to include the chief in this discussion.
Absolutely.
Because it's going to be his men and women on the police department who are going to have
Yep.
to patrol this. And that's where discussions about motion sensors and sensor lights and cameras and all those different types of things, that should be part of this discussion as well.
Good.
Okay?
All
Thank you. Okay, and then finally, under operations, and then we'll go back to the Heritage Tree. Operations, we have the acceptance of a donated vehicle for the Office of Emergency Management. This is a 1999 Freightliner truck coming from Bergen County, and there's a memo attached there. We would need a resolution to accept the donation. Any questions on this? Chris is still here.
I won't take any time on it, but do we really want a 24-year-old truck?
It's not going to get a lot of mileage on it. It's going to be used primarily to store stuff in. I believe I submitted a photograph, not a great picture of it. It has like roll-up doors. They want to use it for storage and replace one of the trailers in emergency management.
All right.
And it's free.
How much would it cost for insurance for a year? Any clue?
I don't know.
It's part of our, I mean, our fleet is
So-
significant.
so no-
Yeah, it's not gonna have an effect on the insurance premium.
We have hundreds of pieces of rolling stock, and we try to make sure everything that we have has a plate on it and is insured.
So this would be stored at Douglas Place?
It better be. I don't have any other places to put it.
Yeah, I know, because you're very conscious of where we store vehicles.
Yes, we have a new storage facility for dead garbage trucks right now, and we're not too thrilled.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay.
And Mayor, you're correct, we skipped the discussion on the Big Tree Heritage
Well,
Tree.
I'm correct because it was pointed out to me, so.
Well, whoever told you was correct.
It's good to have friends. So, Siobhan, do you want to address this? Begin?
Sure. Give me a little bit of time to think about this. So about a month ago, we received, by we, I mean Keith, Lorraine, Pam, and I, a note from NJDEP, from the Forestry Service, that our sugar maple at Shedler had been nominated and had been approved for big tree status in the state of New Jersey. And everyone was pretty excited. You know, it gave us all the attributes. It was a lot of detail was put into the tree, and I was excited about it, but I was a little concerned because what happened?
I shot a rubber band
Oh,
at you
okay.
by mistake.
What happened, you just totally scared me. What happened, what my concerns were, this tree has received an enormous amount of internal services. We've fed it $6,100 of tree food. It has multiple cables, and the report that I received from NJDEP said that the status of the tree was good, and our internal department had ranked it lower. So I was a little interested. I called the forester. We had a good discussion. We talked about the importance of the tree. He was very excited. I was very excited we were going to be on the tree map, and this seemed great. At that point, I was led to believe, through a whole series of things, that anybody could nominate a big tree. About a week later, I received a note that the big tree had been nominated for a heritage tree. And I was, again, concerned. The tree had been nominated, and at this point, the three of us, I don't think Evan or Paul were involved, had been going back, and it was very clear before this came in that the person who nominates it has to have standing, needs to be the owner of the tree. And again, I felt that this was a missed opportunity, and somehow something had been amiss. So I went back and forth. I contacted our lawyer, and the tree is not a heritage tree because of a whole series of events that Matt can speak to. I do want to say, big trees are super important in our community. I have learned so much from Shade Tree, and I feel that they do their job. They prevent flooding. They're very important. They're very important to Ridgewood. I've been joking with everybody that I am going to nominate my 2 oaks, and I am going to do it as the property owner of my house. And I think the whole council will be supportive of Ridgewood getting on the big tree map. These are unique opportunities where Shade Tree can be drawn upon, our Parks Department can be interfaced with, and I feel that the fact that a forester came out here was a missed opportunity for us. The sugar maple has been included in every plan ever that's in Shedler. Nobody's going to cut it down. It's huge. It does its big tree job. It, according to this, drinks like 4 million gallons. It's got a purpose in that park, and it's highlighted. So that being said, moving forward, Shade Tree is going to start a subcommittee, and we are going to handle all nominations on municipal land for both Big Tree and Heritage through Shade Tree. In addition to that, we're hoping to amplify and inspire everybody up here to nominate their own trees. And that's sort of what I have to say, and I think Matt and Keith may have had some other stuff to say.
The only thing I'll add to that is I was aware of some emails where the discussion was happening about how to achieve these designations through the NJDEP. I did not ever see an application filled out and completed until the Councilwoman Winograd made that request of NJDEP, and she forwarded the applications to me. There were 2 applications that were made from 2 different individuals for this specific tree, but I do want to just say for the record that at no time was I ever asked or approached to sign a right of access agreement. And if I had been approached, I would have brought it to the Village Council. I'm well aware of the sensitivity of the topic of Shedler. But I have to tell you, if it was on any municipal land, that really is a policy decision that needs to be decided by the Village Council, not by the village manager. So there was no right of access agreement ever signed for this designation. Moving forward, I think it is the right approach to have Shade Tree evaluate these on a case-by-case basis for municipal-owned property. And then make a recommendation to the Village Council, not to the manager, as to how to proceed as to whether or not trees should be sought after for either big tree or heritage tree status under DEP guidelines.
Matt, I think you had something to say on this?
I got involved in this because it presented a number of legal issues, and I was asked to respond. I'll try not to be redundant to some of the things that have been said already, but I became aware of it on Sunday, October 15th, when our village manager received an email from on the village server from the NJDEP Forestry Service Big and Heritage Tree Conservation and Education Committee, congratulating our manager on the behalf of the village that the sugar maple over at Shedler Park was now certified as a heritage tree. The email was accompanied by a certificate, and it stated that it's now a heritage tree, and it was named after a Revolutionary War hero, a Major Thomas Lambert Biles heritage tree. Certainly not somebody who has anything to do with Ridgewood, but certainly somebody who was in the American Revolutionary War. This happened without any knowledge or consent, as been stated already, participation or permission of the village manager, the village council, or anyone affiliated with the village. It required documents to be filed by the village of Ridgewood. We found out that they were filed, but not by village staff or officials. And according to law, the only way that this could happen is if the village gave consent in what's known as a right of access agreement, and also fill out the documents and submitted it. It couldn't happen without the participation and permission of the owner of the tree. So how did it happen? Well, this was a surprise to the village manager and to many of us, and a request was made to the DEP administrator from the Forestry Service for documents as to how this came about. And immediately he provided some of the documents. I don't think we've seen all of them yet. And it turns out that none of the documents were ever submitted by anybody in the village. Without getting into the depth of all the facts, it was easy to see that the village, its staffs and officials had no idea the application was filed or even in progress. There was no attempt to notify the village of the application. The manager's name was placed on the applications with his email, and there was a statement that we had completed this required form, a right of access agreement, but none of us knew anything about that. Nor did anybody, an official or staff, submit those. There was also a statement on one of the nominating petitions that, quote, "we," meaning the applicant, "can ask them," meaning the village, when this, meaning the application process, moves forward. That was a clear indication that they didn't want the village involved yet. You know, there's been a tremendous amount of social media rhetoric, discourse, accusations, distrust in this matter since this past January. Every move by the village, every discussion has been scrutinized and criticized in one way or the other, which is certainly welcome. The village is a governmental entity. Its elected officials and administrators have listened, and they accept that. It comes with a democracy. It's invited, and as long as it's not disruptive or threatening, it can happen. But when it came to the process of declaring this village-owned tree a heritage tree, secrecy was a mantra, communication was out, and our authority was sidestepped, and actually knowingly put off to a later date. You know, the government, a municipal government, any government can't function this way. Local government can't operate with individuals who are not elected and not a part of the municipal family taking action with the consent or without the consent or the authority of those placed in charge. When people take law into their own hands, the law and the government lose. As a resident, your participation is welcome. You have participation in the voting process, public comments at meetings, volunteerism, running for office, if you will. But it's not taking matters into your own hands and deciding in your home, your kitchen, that your desired result is best for others, and then taking the steps without authority to get your agenda done. This is completely inappropriate. It's the village's hope that governing its residents and stakeholders continues to move forward and not suffer any potential consequences as a result of this incident. There's no accusations being made other than what I've read into the record, but the village cannot operate with individuals acting alone on village matters without authority or participation from its officials when required by law. And lastly, as has been stated by Siobhan and by Keith, that the village sugar maple has always been and continues to be the commitment of the village to maintain and protect this tree. Each iteration of plans for the development of Shedler has never suggested compromising this tree in any way, and that at a time deemed appropriate by the village manager and council, with the help of the Shade Tree Commission, it will consider certifying this tree as a heritage tree and having it named in honor of a distinguished and notable individual from Ridgewood's past. And I believe that would be the process that we go ahead with.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks, Keith, and special thanks to Siobhan, who dug into this to find out exactly what happened, followed the trail of documents, and contacted the DEP to see what happened here. And I echo what Matt said, which is we can't operate like this. We have to go through the right steps, and I urge everyone to follow the right steps and remain within their authority. Does anyone else have any comments?
No, I just want to say, I hope that, you know, when the Shade Tree does take this over, that, you know, they consider applying for the big tree status, and if it qualifies, that's great. I mean, I think that's wonderful.
I think we all feel exactly the same way, Lorraine.
They're ready, Lorraine. We're already fighting about the flyer, so
Right.
we're good, we're
So
good.
I think we're all on the same page. And with that, I believe our agenda is done. We will go back to public comment.
Yeah, Rorik Hallaby, 1 Franklin Avenue. First, a compliment and a kudos to Lorraine for the wonderful summary of the meeting, the CSAC meeting. I attended the meeting. I would say it was rather heated, but I really think, Lorraine, you've done a good job at summarizing the key points, and hopefully something good will come out of that meeting. This is one. And also a kudos to my friend Pamela for raising a question about the need for a restroom at the bus station. This is an unmentionable thing, but guess what? We need it. We really need it. I mean, we're a civilized society, and every civilized, every advanced economy has public restrooms in their cities, if you will. One small thing, Chris, I think may have mentioned, I may have misunderstood him, that the new generator for the building will be fired by diesel, not natural gas. That, it might be cheaper to get a diesel generator, but you know something, the cost in the long run will be much worse environmentally, etc. Now, Pam, I know you're a big environmental supporter, so I would urge you to look into it, because people are moving away from diesel into natural gas. In fact, at our house here, we had a generator, and that was natural gas. It was very, very clean, etc. As far as the HPC and the SDC and Shedler, you really have to look at the last 6-7 months and the hundreds of people who came here to talk and to give their opinion, right or wrong, etc. And I would think that the members of the SDC and the HPC should have felt free to come and give their opinions. I mean, for the village council to extend an invitation on Crane Stationery to invite them is just ridiculous. I mean, anyone who felt strongly about that should have felt free to come here to talk, if you will. And which also raises a question, where was the HPC and the SEC under the previous administration? I would like to see what role the HPC played in planning the restoration, I put that between quotes, of the Shedler House. I'd like them to come and tell us what they did and why they did it, etc. I'd like to think the SDC to come and tell us about the trees that were planted along the berm, which were most unsuitable. But anyway, but the one thing I do want to, oops, I'm running out of time. As far as decorum, 6 lawyers here, 5 lawyers. I'm a layman, philosophically speaking. Do what you can to encourage people to talk. Various people talk in different ways. And so far, don't make a mountain of a molehill, because the problems have not been that bad. And I encourage you to encourage people to talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Rorik.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Boyd A. Loving, 342 South Irving Street. There was a question asked about where this free truck was going to be stored, and I don't believe an answer was given. I believe that Mr. Rudishatter said something like, I hope they know where they're going to be putting it. That concerns me.
He said it was going to be at OEM.
Okay.
He did confirm that.
That concerns me because, you know, people buy ladder trucks and then they realize.
He may have mumbled, but he did say it was.
He did say, okay, so you do know where it's going to be put and it's going to fit where it's going to be put?
Yes.
Okay. The other comment I'd like to make is I support the Deputy Mayor's comment that your telecommunications consultant needs to be consulted about this project concerning the cell phone antennas. I have a friend who's in that business, and there are a lot of different options. Don't always just look at one option. I know that there is some concern, or there is a desire to capitalize on revenue, but there may be a better location that the village owns for this. The thought comes into my mind that recently you had an emergency appropriation for doing repairs in this building. Now you're talking about adding more weight to the roof. You're talking about adding antennas on the side of the building. Just beware that you might be getting yourselves into a little bit of trouble. So do contact your consultant and see what other options are available. Again, there might be another property that the village owns where you can collect the revenue and maybe put another carrier besides Verizon on the roof. 263 Franklin Avenue already has one carrier over there, so you're not going to get the person who's doing business over there, but you might get AT&T. There's only 3 carriers out there now. There's only Verizon, AT&T, and T-Mobile. So give the consultant a phone call after you get the bid specs out and see what your consultant has to say before you lock yourselves into putting more weight on the roof, antennas on the facade, have cracks, and then you got another emergency appropriation. So beware. Thank you.
Thank you, Boyd. Anyone else? Seeing none, I'm going to close public comment. Nope, no one on hybrid, but thank you. I had 2 people saying to me, check hybrid, because you guys know that I sometimes forget. So, and with that, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Well, can I just
Excuse
say?
me, I'm so, I beg your pardon. I beg your pardon.
I just wanted to say that we do not instruct our committees to make a statement or not make a statement, and you've seen that Green Ridgewood decided to come to Village Council and make a statement with regard to artificial turf, and that's an example of how our committees operate.
I can add something to that, because I know that there was some back and forth with regard to a meeting that I attended, and I very expressly told everybody at the meeting that you are free to come to a council meeting anytime on your own, but unless the committee votes for a particular position, you can't represent that you are there on the behalf of the committee. You can do it as an individual, and if you at all ever think that being on the committee infringes on your ability to speak personally about an issue, then maybe you should consider about not being on the committee, and that's what I told them.
Anyone else? And with that, we will now entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, thank you.